And welcome back to the Sporting Lounge. Today is November 21st, 2023, and we are here talking about our Week 11 recaps, going over our score predictions, production numbers, reflections over the week, and getting over some topics that are breaking news around the NFL. Austin, why don't you go ahead and lead us into that?
Yeah, so when I was kind of preparing for the podcast, I found some stuff that I wanted to just to briefly mention over. One, very sad. Joe Burrow out for the year with the torn ligament in his wrist. He's getting surgery on that soon, so he is donezo for the year. It's very sad for the Bengals and sad for my fantasy team. I'm not gonna lie. Another kind of big one is Aaron Jones has an MCL sprain, so he's week to week at the moment, but he's listed doubtful for this Thursday night game. So which means their top two backs for the Packers are potentially going to be out for their upcoming game this week. So it might be worthwhile picking up that third stringer off of waivers if you can. And if you really need to, might be a good play this week. Another one I kind of wanted to talk about as well is Colts waived Shaquille Leonard. Which was kind of wild. Do you think that was a good move, bad move? How do you feel about that one, Shane?
I mean, it makes sense with where the Colts are at. Like they're not utilizing him to the contract's potential. Like they're overpaying. At this point, it's just worth it. Like if I'm the Colts front office, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I wonder how much they tried to trade him before the deadline. I'm curious on how many calls they fielded, or if they even tried at all.
I'm sure they tried, but like, what's a team willing to pay for taking on that? You get rid of him because you're trying to get rid of that contract, and essentially, and you recognize that's a valuable player. So like, you recognize the player's worth a fourth or a third round pick, but because of the contract, we know how stingy the Colts are. Just as an organization, like they're probably demanding that fourth round type pick, and a team's not willing to pay that because they have to take on so much of the contract.
I think it kind of depends, right? Because that is a massive contract to take on immediately. But if you can kind of do like a sign and trade type deal where you can immediately get him to agree to restructure his contract, could have been a worthwhile investment at that point.
Yeah, and maybe he just wasn't willing to restructure because of how the contract's structured. The dead cap is going to hit him pretty heavy for the rest of the season, but the next 2 seasons it's going to have a lighter impact. So like it makes sense, like if you're going to cut him like now to like I would have done it, in July personally. After the cap rolls over and everything, and let it just eat out this year's cap, and still have the player. I think that he
would have been smart.
Still one of the best 40 players at his position, which means, he should definitely be rostered. Just the issue is, he has a price tag associated with him, and, he's demanding a top 15 price tag when he's performing at, a top 35 level-ish, Do
you have a prediction where he might go? Or where he'd be a good fit?
I think he'd be a really, really good fit. Like, I'm thinking on the Finns. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go there. The Bills are another team that come to mind. Like, he could definitely slide into that and just be a plug-and-play type player. Maybe the Rams. I could definitely see that.
Rams
it's got to be a playoff team, more than likely. So, although he would be a benefit for the Cardinals, I don't think he ends up going to the Cardinals. Even though he'd be a benefit for the Titans, I don't think he'd end up going to the Titans.
I wouldn't. I don't see that happening.
Yeah. So,
So the next story I kind of want to talk about or briefly mention is Aaron Rodgers is running.
Yep.
And he's apparently going to be practiced in 2 weeks, which is wild after tearing his Achilles after 4 snaps. But I mean, with modern medicine and modern techniques, at this rate, anything's possible.
I mean,
so I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if they're necessarily going to be in position for the playoffs, but They might
yeah,
be because Tim Boyle is going to be a starting quarterback. So, and the Jets looked way better with Tim Boyle in that short time he was on the field than they did the whole game with Zach Wilson.
yeah. I mean, like, here's the thing too. Like, I don't think we can question Aaron Rodgers' toughness anymore. I don't think that's a discussion anymore. Like, he could have easily just missed the whole season and not rehabbed this hard, but he did. He's been
Yeah,
putting
and
in
just
the work.
and just took that money
Yeah,
the
just
Jets gave him.
look at what Deshaun
You
Watson
know,
did. Like,
yeah,
and Aaron
he could have been
Rodgers.
like, "All right, see you guys next year."
Yeah, exactly. But like, he's trying to come back, and this team is. I think this team's rallying around Aaron Rodgers coming back and trying to get in a position where they can. I think if Aaron Rodgers is back, the Jets become a major threat. It's just a question of, are they going to be able to get into the playoffs?
Oh yeah, man. Like, I think the past 2 years, the Jets have had a really good quality team,
Mhm.
just been plagued by bad quarterback performances. And then when they finally thought they had their quarterback, 4 plays in, he's out.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
Aaron. I think Aaron loves the Jets. Like it's obvious at this point for me. The way he talks to Garrett.
yeah.
And everything. Like the whole system. Just he loves it, and it seems like he's in charge out there, which he never had with the Packers,
Oh,
but he
hello.
deserved. Like it seemed like him and Matt LaFleur always had to go back and forth, and that was getting on his nerves, and that seems like the biggest reason he wanted out of Green Bay for the longest time. But like, now he kind of has control of that team. They're listening. The organization is listening to the receivers he wants, and they're going and getting them. And with Devontae Adams coming up
Hey,
on free agency, I bet you Rodgers would take a pay cut to get Adams back. I wouldn't be surprised. And
yeah.
that's just the way I feel about how the Jets and Aaron's relationship is, and I think that's reflected with how fast he's coming back, and he's showing incredible toughness to come back from a serious injury like this, where like I don't know if we've ever seen a player come back from an Achilles tear within the same season.
Not the Cam Akers did in the playoffs, but
Not this quickly.
I think that was the second week of the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think came back in the divisional round,
Mhm.
which I believe is the same year they won the Super Bowl. So mildly impressive, especially if he comes back during the regular season too.
Yep.
Even wilder.
Yep.
I just hope they actually are in a position that they will make the playoffs,
Yeah, they can make a run.
so that
it's not wasted.
exactly with Aaron Rodgers, yeah, and actually see what they can do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely. If he's practicing in 2 weeks and he gets the nod from doctors, the Jets could still be in this thing. But the AFC is tough, and that all starts with the AFC North. And that starts with the Bengals Ravens game that just went down. Ravens end up winning the game 34-20. I perfectly predicted that the Ravens were going to score 34 points. I was a little bit off with the Bengals. I said 34-28, and last week you predicted that the Bengals would win 27-24. So, with that being said, we talked about the Joe Burrow injury a little bit. How do you feel about Jake Browning leading this Bengals offense?
I don't feel confident.
He looks solid.
He did, and it's not really a knock on him because I think they'll be semi-competitive. But I mean, they're no longer a threat. I think.
Yep.
He looked comfortable in the pocket. He made some good reads, and then, he came in a tough spot. I think kind of when he came in, people expected that they were going to lose automatically at that point. I think they win like a game or two. I think they'll keep games competitive. I don't think they'll necessarily get blown out.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really see them winning.
So
I don't see them finishing above 500 now.
Okay, so the Jake Browning-led Bengals, this is the rest of their schedule. Steelers, Jags, Colts, Vikings, Steelers, Chiefs, Browns. How many of those do you think are a win?
Oof. I think the Colts and Browns are their best bet at wins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because they played the Steelers twice. Steelers are playing good ball. Jags are the Jags, so they're still playing, pretty solid. They're still playing well. Vikings
they're on a
look good.
renaissance. Same
No
thing with the
reason for
Colts.
me. No reason for me to think. Yeah, no reason for me to think they're going to lose. And then the Chiefs are the Chiefs. They can be great. They can put up fucking 42 points on you at any time.
Mhm.
Bengals aren't capable of that. They'll still score points, but they're not. If it's a shootout, they're going to lose that shootout.
Yeah.
And then Browns are kind of a weird team to me, and I still think they lose that game. I just don't foresee them, nor do I have confidence in winning
Any of those games,
right? Because they got just the Colts and the Browns. I think are the best chances at winning.
Yeah. And do you think they win them
in their final 6 games? I think it's like 50-50.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe 60-40. I don't. It's not a high percentage chance. Jags definitely a loss. Chiefs definitely a loss. Steelers, I still think they could potentially split.
Mm-hmm.
But now I think it's more like a 30% chance kind of thing.
I think this Bengals team is one of those teams that are going to get 3 wins throughout the rest of the season. Now, if one of those wins or both those wins are against the Steelers or they end up beating the Colts, I could see them beating the Chiefs somehow, some way, because, they still are. They're a Super Bowl caliber team. Just because their Super Bowl caliber quarterback went down doesn't mean that the rest of the team is just MIA,
Yeah.
Jake Browning looked capable at quarterback. He was looking about as good as Joe Burrow was, just a little bit more, safer passes compared to Joe.
Yeah.
And
that's why I say I think they'll keep. Right. I am too. That's why I say they'll keep games competitive.
Right.
But not necessarily capable of winning a lot, because I think some of these games are going to be shootout.
Right.
Or have that potential, right? So their opponent's just going to score points, i.e. the Chiefs, potentially the Vikings and the Steelers and the Jags.
Yeah.
And I just don't think the Bengals offense is really capable of that. But this game against the Steelers, I think is going to tell us a lot about how the offense is going to look for the rest of the year.
Yeah. And I mean, here's the thing,
the Bengals score 20 plus, right? Do they score 20 plus points? Maybe, maybe not. But if they can score up to 30, then I'll probably feel a little more comfortable about the rest of their schedule.
Yeah. And if the Bengals win this, they move into 3rd place in the division against the Steelers.
Right.
So this is a big game for them. This is a big game for the Steelers because they need to stay alive in a tight division. So this is a heavyweight AFC North matchup. And I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be very close. But
I think it's going to be I think it is going to be a close game as well. I think probably within 10 points or so.
Yeah, I'm thinking within 5.
I like it.
We'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. But on the Ravens side of the ball, you want to talk about pure dominance on offense. Lamar Jackson had another game with 300 yards over scrimmage, 2 touchdowns, no picks, only got sacked 3 times on a 16-yard loss. 16-26 completion rating on an average of 10.2 yards per pass. Obviously, Mark Andrews is out for the year. That's the big news coming out of this game. And
yeah,
that was a rough tackle, rough injury to watch. But it happens. It's
You're pretty right about Odell Beckham, because I believe you said he over 100 and a touchdown, and he got over the 100.
Yeah, I was thinking.
So he had himself a game.
Yeah, that made sense. And Nelson Aguilar, he put up some fantasy points too. He ended up being worth 11 or 12, and I think that's what I predicted for him. And then I said Gus Edwards was going to be touchdown reliant, and that's exactly what he was. Without that 2 touchdowns, he is only worth 8 points. 9 points?
Yeah, just over 9 points.
So
he had 62 on the ground and then 8 receiving on 2 catches. So
yep. So
yeah,
he is worth 9 points exactly without the touchdowns, and then throw the 12 points on there.
Yeah, you're dead on about Gus Edwards. So, I mean, if you started him, you're pretty happy.
Yeah.
Pretty thankful for those 2 touchdowns. Otherwise, you might be kind of pissed.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
that was good. All in all, good game.
Player I want to talk about from this game is Logan Wilson. Do you think that he's a dirty player?
Wait, what happened? I didn't watch the whole game.
So he's the one that made the tackle on the Mark Andrews play, on the Mark Andrews injury. He did what's called a hip sweep tackle, which
I heard about that.
Is what injured Mark Andrews. And he's made several tackles throughout the season that are very Vontaze Burfict-esque. So a lot of people are calling him a dirty player. I don't think that he's dirty like Vontaze was, because Vontaze was trying to hurt people. I think Logan Wilson is just a hard-hitting player that is, trying his best. You can't high hit people anymore, and they're talking about banning the hip swing tackle.
Yeah, and they're calling for it. I saw that.
It's getting to the point where it's like, what's a guy supposed to do? You take away high hits because you're trying to save guys from concussions. Well, this was what people were saying back then, when high hits were getting banned, was, there's going to be a lot more leg injuries. There's going to be a lot more season-ending injuries, because, guys are going to have to hit around the waist and tear up legs. And we've seen that come to fruition over the past 5-6 years since those high hits got banned. And I think it's just kind of the reality that if we want football to be a contact sport, then we need to respect that there's injuries that come along with it. Although I'm a Steelers fan, I hate to say it, I don't think Logan Wilson's a dirty player. I just think that he has had plays where he looks dirty. Every player, has plays that look like that. It doesn't matter if you're Minka Fitzpatrick on the Nick Chubb tackle. It doesn't matter if you're, it just doesn't matter on who you are. Just defensively, especially on the defensive side of the ball, your job is to hit people hard. And, if you do that effectively, you get called dirty sometimes. I don't think Logan Wilson falls into that category, because when I think of a dirty player, here's the perfect debate. James Harrison versus Vontaze Burfict, right? James Harrison was renowned as a super dirty player. Vontaze Burfict is regarded as a super dirty player. The difference is James Harrison hit people hard and was trying to sit them out for the game. That's just how that was. So if you think that's dirty, then sure, he was a dirty player. But the difference is with Vontaze Burfict was he was taking cheap shots to do that. James Harrison was doing legal hits that were hard. Compared to Vontaze Burfict, circa the AB reception, circa, I think he hit Steve Smith Jr. really hard, or Sr. really hard on a cheap hit too. Those are cheap hits. What Logan Wilson did wasn't a cheap hit. He was just trying to make a tackle and disaster happened. And, I think it kind of sucks for players that are hard hitters, that are trying to, Logan Wilson isn't necessarily this athletic freak. He's just a very hard tackler that, that's what his game's built on. Like a Robert Spillane type, for the Raiders. You're talking about a guy that is going to be a hard-hitting type guy, and that's what their whole game's built on. Well, that's what the Bengals want. They want a thumper. And a thumper is starting to just become a synonym for being dirty, and I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, because, if you want to make that argument, then you got to call so many defensive players from even 10 years ago dirty.
You got to call Ray
10,
Lewis
15,
dirty.
20 years ago. Exactly. You got to call all the all-time greats dirty.
Yeah.
At that point, so it's I don't get the argument. There's a difference between playing hard, playing physical, and being dirty.
Yeah. I think Logan Wilson at this point of his career is teetering on that line of being on the dirty side versus just a hard hitter. But I still put him on the hard hitting side.
Yeah, you'd have a better argument to call freaking Mac Jones dirty than really Logan Wilson, because he's had some questionable hits.
That's true.
Throughout his 2.5-year career so far. So
That's true. Ravens defense came out to play. We've seen Patrick Queen and Raquan Smith both have themselves a field day. Again, I circled on them last week, but, that's a big deal. Getting 20-plus tackles at your middle linebacker spot, that's a huge deal. And that's something I always want to circle. They're not letting things get to the second level. When you're getting 20-plus tackles, for reference, the Bengals rushed the ball 23 times, and they only had 136 yards on the ground collectively. And 40 of those coming from Jake Browning on scrambles. So, and a 19-yard long. So, it's just one of those things where it's like, we take that out of the equation, 96 yards on the ground, or even less than that, 89, because one of them was Joe Burrow on a scramble. So 89 yards on the ground, and that's how you end up looking at that 20 tackle number. They're not allowing those big chunk plays to come over them. They're getting those stops when they need to, you're holding up that running attack. Realistically, 89 yards, the stat sheet says 136 because of QB scrambles, but, that's that. And, they were holding down, the middle of the field, not letting them get free receptions. Like Irv Smith walked out of the game with 0 receptions. Drew Sample walked out of the game with only 2 receptions, 19 yards. So, they're doing a really good job blocking up right there. Tyler Boyd was a player that I predicted to have a great game, and he didn't because, they were crossing him a lot and catching him right between Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith. 3 receptions, 22 yards on 6 targets. That's how you beat really good offenses, is having a really good center of the field. And I really want to circle that middle linebacking core for the Ravens.
Yeah. Like you said, when you control that middle of the field, it changes the whole dynamic of that offense, of the opposing offense. It makes things so much harder because then they got attacked outside and attack deep, and try to make you lay off the middle of the field. But the Ravens never did that.
Yep, exactly.
Because they have such great middle linebackers, such a great linebacking core as a whole, that they can that they don't have to do that they're not forced to, and never will be.
Exactly. So that leads me into my next game of the week, which is the other AFC North matchup that happened this week, which had repercussions following it, which we will definitely circle on in just a moment. I know you wanted to talk about it at the top of the segment, but we're going to talk about it here. That's why I cut you off when I did earlier. I knew it was a game that was coming up. So,
yeah, that's why I didn't bring it up.
Yep, that's fair. That's fair. You're a smart man. We're on the same page, telepathically. So we're looking at the Browns beating the Steelers 13-10. You and I both predicted that the Steelers were going to win. You predicted 31-10 Steelers. I predicted 24-0 Steelers. And talk about an ugly game. It was a rough game to watch.
Yeah, 106 passing yards, 3.8 average, but they did killer on the ground. 172 yards, Jalen Warren.
Yeah.
9 carries, 129 yards, and a tutty.
Yep. And, people...
So fantasy-wise, he did great.
Yeah, he had a field day. Don't discount that he had 3 receptions out of the backfield for 16 yards as well. So, right there, that bumps him up to, 135 yards total, or 145 yards total. So you're looking at,
145.
23 and a half points. So Jalen Warren has definitely earned. I think that you can comfortably start him RB2 as a staple moving forward. People bash on Najee. Here's the thing with Najee. You got to realize how the Steelers are utilizing him. They're utilizing him as a power runner. He's there to grind down defenses. He's there to make it so Jalen Warren has an easier time against these defenses. You watch the first quarter and a half, they didn't give Jalen the ball at all. It was just Najee. Just feeding Najee the ball and just letting him grind down the defense. And that's exactly what he was doing. The biggest thing for me during the Steelers game when I was watching it live was, they just started passing the ball nonstop. And it was on these weird ass routes that, were just idiotic. Which that leads into Matt Canada getting fired.
Yeah. How you feeling? Because now they got the running backs coach as part of the play calling.
Yeah, so
as well, and I think it's like a interim offensive coordinator they got going on right now.
So I've been waiting for the official release today. Let's double check this. I don't know if they have announced the new offensive coordinator yet.
Mm,
It looks like, let me double check. Faulkner is expected to take over as the interim offensive coordinator, and Sullivan, who has previous coordinator experience with the New York Giants and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, will handle the play calling.
okay.
So Randy Faulkner is who they're referencing.
Oh yeah, so Mike Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner.
Oh, Eddie, excuse me.
Oh wait, see, yeah, Eddie Faulkner is going to be the offensive coordinator, while the quarterback coach Mike Sullivan as the play caller.
Yep. And I mean, I said this a couple weeks ago when the Bills decided to move on from their OC, but like Ken Dorsey,
Mm-hmm.
was late in the season, and that's the biggest reason I didn't like the move. And honestly, I didn't think Ken Dorsey deserved to get the can either. He was doing things to get the offense yards. The Bills were ranked top 7 at worst in every position other than scoring, offensively. So like when you're looking at the stats like that and you're watching the Bills live, it's just like they're not finishing. And if you want to blame that on your OC, sure. But with the Matt Canada firing, I'm bittersweet about it because it's so late in the season. Like, now, the Steelers have enough talent on offense where they could turn this thing around. They could go ahead and start cooking with gas if they get the right play calls. But,
Right.
you have to imagine that at some point before they fired Matt Canada, just with how the Steelers operate, that he already allegedly wasn't calling the plays for the last few weeks. So, like, what does this actually change for the Steelers? What's going on? Did they just need a change of scenery at the coaching position? Was that, like, what we're really thinking? And the other thing for me is, like, Matt Canada was so big on, I need to get my guy at quarterback. I need to get my guy at quarterback. Okay. So they got him as guy at quarterback and pushed out Ben Roethlisberger, who's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Okay, sure. He is at the twilight of his career. Whatever. Okay, so then they go ahead and get the pieces that he needs over 2 seasons, and then he comes out this season. Well, my offense isn't built to score from behind. Okay, what about this game? You weren't behind all game. You were tied.
No,
till there was 2 seconds left. And that leads me into talking about Cleveland's offensive production this week. Dorian Thompson looked horrible. He got the win, but he didn't look great.
got a lucky win.
Yep. They won in spite of him. 24 for 43 on 165 yards, averaging 3.8 yards per pass and a pick. The Steelers defense was doing a good job getting in his face and not allowing him to get the ball down the field. They were holding on tight. They didn't allow over 100 yards rushing, and Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt, we have seen tear up defenses this season. They shut him down other than letting Jerome Ford get the singular touchdown that the Browns scored that day. And, overall, the defense played great for the Steelers. Njoku had another stellar game. Do you think Njoku is relevant in top 5 tight end conversation for the rest of the season?
I want to say I think he's good and he's worth starting most weeks, but I don't know if I say top 5. Maybe I'm kind of flipping back between 5 and 6 with him.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. 6. I'm kind of thinking like 4 to 7.
I think you can comfortably start him.
Yep.
And you don't really have a problem there because he's going to get you points, he's going to get you work, and every once in a while he'll get you a touchdown.
Yep.
Right. So he'll get his 5 to 6 catches a game, probably 50 to 60 yards. Right there, that's 10 points. So if he gets you that touchdown, that's 16, 17 points right there.
Yep.
And you're happy with that. Happy with 10 points.
Your basement is 10 points at tight end, and your ceiling is like 20 points. Like that's Kelsey-like numbers. Realistically.
I think he's a comfortable start.
I agree.
But I could also understand you not starting him at times as well. I wouldn't argue that.
Yeah. I like him a lot. We've seen the connection between him and Dorian Thompson. Dorian Thompson has a hot hand. So he's going to get a lot of targets just because he got 15 targets this game. Did you know that?
Yeah.
He dropped
Yeah.
2 of those too, by the way. So
So that's what I'm saying. Like, comfortably start him.
Yeah.
If this game is anything to go off of, he's going to get work. Now he's not going to get 15 targets every game. That'd just be insane to think. I think his floor. I think his floor is reasonably like 8 targets.
I wouldn't be surprised if he
8 to
gets
10
10 plus
target
targets.
range.
I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 10 targets consistently from this game out. I think that there will only be one game he doesn't get a lot of targets on. And, we started talking about the AFC North standings. The Browns move up to second place. They're only half a game behind the Ravens at this point. They're 7-3. Steelers are 6-4. The remainder of their schedule goes like this: Broncos, Rams, Jaguars, Bears, Texans, Jets, Bengals.
Oof. So Broncos might be. Where the Broncos been playing, that's probably going to be a loss. Jags, Texans, also probably a loss. So they might only get 3 of the next 6 wins.
Yeah.
Or win 3 of the next 6 games.
I could see that.
I think that's very reasonable. Very possible.
And what about on the Steelers side of the ball? Do you think this offensive coordinator change will change anything?
I don't know, man. It really depends. I mean, I think it's kind of too early to tell. I think it potentially does. And hopefully the change will allow the Steelers to open up the playbook a lot more than what they seem to be doing. Because like when we saw Kenny just call plays, or we saw the Steelers perform a lot better. Now, in recent weeks, the Steelers were performing, I think, better on offense, but still not to their potential where they could be with the personnel that they have on the offensive side of the ball, especially. So that does kind of give merit to, well, maybe someone else was calling the plays kind of thing. It wasn't Matt Canada or whatever,
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for the Steelers because even though I don't like the Steelers, they still got so much potential on that offense that they could be a very, very good football team.
Yeah, 110%. The Steelers' remaining schedule.
It's just this next. Yeah, this next game for the Steelers is going to tell you a lot. Yeah,
I agree. I think Matt Canada's firing is going to be more of a rally point than necessarily a actual change. The players have been pretty much going out in the media all season and saying fire Matt Canada without saying fire Matt Canada. Najee, George Pickens has came out multiple times and said, "I'm tired of this shit. Free me." I don't know if you remember that Instagram drama, but he's saying free me. And Deontay Johnson, who has proven multiple times throughout the season that he is the calm head in that wide receiver locker room, he came out and was like, "This ain't working." And when you got your leader of your wide receiver room, possibly you could argue Deontay Johnson is the leader of that offense, more so than Kenny. Because, Kenny can't say that. Kenny just can't. You kind of get the real look inside the locker room with a guy like Deontay Johnson, who's like that subtle leader, who's leading that skill group, and he's saying, "I'm tired of this." And following that, the next day, Matt Canada got fired.
When you lose your guys, when you lose that locker room, especially as a coach, it's so hard to do anything, right? It's so hard to get that player's trust and acceptance back. So when he lost it, probably lost it a couple of years ago. They just didn't want to make a change yet. But one thing I did like is during Mike Tomlin's press conference about it, he kind of just took all the blame for not really all the blame, but he took all the responsibility for firing and said it was my decision and no one else's. Kind of shielding anyone else from potentially blame if someone wanted to blame him for firing Matt Canada or get mad about it, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, because the original report came out, and the original report said that Art Rooney fired Matt Canada, which a lot of people were like, "Oh, okay." They had to go up to the owner, and what I think happened was Art Rooney pulled Tomlin aside and said a few weeks ago, I think, probably after that Jags loss, he probably pulled him aside and said, "Listen, we have a Super Bowl caliber team, talent-wise. The offense might not be there yet, but that defense is Super Bowl caliber. And that offense...
Yeah, defense, but not offense.
That offense is probably wild card caliber with the amount of talent they have on it. which that is enough to get you a ring. Like, with the amount of talent on that team, you could get a ring with
We
this.
saw with the Patriots with their threes in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
They had a Super Bowl caliber defense and a pretty good to mediocre to pretty good offense.
Yeah. And that's exactly where the Steelers are. You know, you have this offensive line that's starting to click, especially with the addition of Broderick Jones. And, you know, finally getting him to start, and you got this defense that is just, like, locking up teams. You know, like, you're holding teams under 20 points, you win. You win a lot. And every time the Steelers have held a team under 20 points, other than the first game against the Browns, they led up 22, but they scored 26 and got the win. And this past week, they've won every game that they kept their opponent at 20 points or less, and the Jags, which they only allowed them to score 20. So the Steelers' defense has only allowed a team to score more than 20 points 3 times this season, and 2 of them resulting in their 4 losses. You know.
So, fun fact that I saw when I was just reading before the pod was that the NFL is on track to score the lowest amount of points since like 2009 combined. Because right now teams are averaging combined like 43.8 or something like that.
Yeah.
43.9. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. And, you know, it just seems like it's been a low scoring season. And I think a big thing with that is, you know, like, you had the AFC North that, like, you have 4 great defenses in one division. And that's just the AFC North. You got the Lions, who have a great defense. You have the 49ers, who have a great defense. You have the Eagles, who have a great defense. You know, like, we're talking about, like...
The Bulldogs have a great defense.
The Philadelphia Bulldogs have a great defense. But no, actually, you know, we're seeing a wave of defenses that are elite all at the same time. And I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes the standard, because you can't just check down and bing, 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 and win games anymore. You know, like, you can't rely on your quarterback to win you games anymore. This is playing almost like 90s football, or it's like 90s and prior football, I should say. You know,
right.
You can't rely on just a quarterback to get you wins anymore. You know, there's teams that are like the Jets that are a quarterback away from being a great team. But, you know, just like a team like the Bears might be just a middle linebacker away from having a great defense, or, you know, the Raiders just being a good cornerback away from having a great defense.
So real quick, what do you think the odds are that the AFC North performs like this next year?
Extremely high.
Is like the best. You think like higher than 70%?
Yeah,
high.
I think it's like 90%.
Okay.
Because here's the thing, like,
I could see that.
Most of these contracts are staying in place. None of these guys are moving. You're going to keep almost the same rosters and just improve them this all season. You know, you're just improving these teams because no one's going anywhere. You don't got to worry about Lamar's contract yet. You don't got to worry about Joe Burrows. You don't got to worry about Deshaun Watson. You know, and Deshaun Watson's trying to finally cook up with, you know, playing good, and he is out for the season the next game. So, you know, like, if Deshaun Watson's able to play, like, remotely like that throughout most of the games next season, the Browns are going to be a threat. The Ravens, obviously a threat. Joe Burrow coming back, that makes the Bengals a threat, you know, and then the Steelers, you know, being the Steelers and just refusing to go under 500 for some reason and not make the playoffs and keep on getting mid-round draft picks is just going to happen. So, you know, yeah, I think, you know, the biggest drop-off this following season for a team is going to be the Steelers. I think the Steelers, unless their offense just greatly improves over the offseason, because, you know, they got guys like Cam Hayward that are starting to get up there in age, but they got Keanu Benton already to replace him, who's been playing very stellar as a rookie. You know, like, that's the thing that you got to look at is, like, how much depth do they have? And each one of these teams have good depth. Like, you know, the Browns quietly got Dawan Jones from Ohio State this past season in the draft, and they got him in the 4th round. He started this week against TJ Watt and kept him locked up, you know, took care of it. So it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, how these teams are all built, like, they're going to be good for the next 3 to 5 seasons, and they're all going to be threats playoff wise
for the next 3 to 5 seasons. Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's kind of how I was feeling about it. And I'm kind of happy because it's going to make things interesting, especially towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
Because like for the next, it's very possible over the next 2-3 seasons, especially that potentially all 4 teams are in the playoffs.
Yep.
And to me, that's just so fun and also funny at the same time.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's a little
I just
crazy.
hope the Bengals re-sign T. Higgins this offseason.
Where do you think T. Higgins would go if he didn't go and re-sign with the Bengals?
Well, if he doesn't, I would hope he go to the Patriots because Jesus Christ, it didn't need weapons.
Yeah, you know who I think he'd go to?
Who?
Maybe a team like the Cardinals.
Cardinals could use him.
And that leads me
Cardinals
to my
do
next
need him.
game.
Maybe the Bears.
You and I both predicted Texans were going to win. Yeah, he'd be good on the Bears. He'd be good on the Bears. Huh? No, you and I both predicted that the Texans were going to win. 31-0 by you, 34-13 by me, 21-16. So someone commented on our most recent YouTube video, our short that we posted, saying that guy don't know what he's talking about with Kyler coming back. They ain't getting shut out. Do you have a response to that?
Nah, I don't care, man. I don't. I think the Cardinals honestly got lucky with C.J. Stroud playing probably one of his worst games.
Mhm.
He had 336 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, but he also had 3 interceptions. So it was his most turnover heavy game, right? Because before this, he only had 1 interception, and then he comes out with 3. It's hard to win with multiple turnovers like that. So the Texans almost got lucky that they weren't playing a better offense, because if they're playing a better offense with those 3 turnovers, I think it's a different ball game and the Texans loss.
Yeah, I agree.
Devin Singletary ate it up. 22 carries, 112 yards, 1 touchdown.
Averaging 5.1.
So he had himself a hell of a fantasy day.
Yep, and don't forget his 2 receptions for 6 yards.
Yeah, so he had 20 plus fantasy points.
Yep.
Tank Dell, 8 receptions, 150, and a tutty.
Mm-hmm.
So that's almost 30 points right there.
Yep.
As well. Nico Collins had a solid day, 7 catches, 65 yards. So he got you about 13 points, 13 and a half points, which isn't bad.
Mm-hmm.
Not great, not bad, but, right there in the middle.
Yeah.
Something that you're happy with, but you're not angry with. And after that, it kind of drops off because Robert Woods, 5 for 44. Dalton Schultz saved his fantasy day with that touchdown.
Yep, he sure did.
He had 2 catches for 32 yards. So right there, that's 5.5 points almost. And then that tutty bumped him up to 11.5. So pretty solid for a tight end day.
Yep.
I'm actually deciding between Dalton Schultz and Evan Ingram for the rest of the year since Mark Andrews is out. I think I'm gonna lean Evan Ingram.
So that's something I wanted to say was the Texans came out and said that they were going to be working on getting Schultz more targets as well.
Yeah. But my thing is, just because they say that doesn't mean they're going to, so It makes me nervous to play that and kind of hinge his performance or starting him on the word of them. Whereas Evan Ingram's been pretty solid all year round. We know he's going to get the targets and the work.
Well,
Dalton Schultz, it's just more of like a wait and see.
Well, like when CJ Stroud's passing it down to their tight end, Schultz, he's much more efficient and he's taking advantage of those free yards. And I think that's a big thing that like CJ Stroud specifically needs to work on. But you and I have been saying this for the last 3 weeks, and it seems like the media is finally catching up to what we were saying. CJ Stroud for MVP.
Yeah, man. Hold on, I gotta look this up because I wonder if a rookie's ever won NFL MVP.
While you're looking that up, I'll go ahead and start diving into the Cardinals stats a little bit. Okay. Kyler Murray, 214 yards, 1-to-1 TD pick ratio. James Conner had himself an okay day. 14 carries, 62 yards. But don't forget, Kyler Murray had 7 carries, 51 yards, and a TD on the ground. So he got like 265 yards and 2 TDs and a pick. So you're looking at a pretty solid QB performance. In all honesty, I think it's about 18 to 20 points. But Greg Dortch was the wide receiver that you had a lottery pick, and Trey McBride went out and had a good week again. He had 9 points. So, solid at tight end, nothing great, but he had 7 targets, 5 receptions, 43 yards, no TDs. If he had a TD, you're talking about a really good week. I still think he's a staple start at tight end at this juncture. I still think he's a top 10 tight end for fantasy.
Yeah, he still got 7 targets. So, I mean,
yep. So,
he's getting those looks.
Greg Dortch, if that was the Cardinals wide receiver that you decided to put all your chips on black on, then congratulations. You went and got yourself 13 points. But, in all seriousness, do you start any of these Cardinals wide receivers from here on out?
Not comfortably. Kind of still hold firm on Trey McBride as my favorite person to start on the receiving side of the ball.
Yep.
For the Cardinals.
I agree.
Maybe at times you could start Hollywood Brown or Greg Dortch. But those are I think they're almost kind of dart throws, where if you need to, you can start them because they may have those boom plays and they're capable of it.
Yep.
But I think Trey McBride is probably the safer play in the Cardinals offense outside James Conner.
Yep.
That's kind of where I'm at with that. But to quickly go back to the rookie to win MVP, do you have any guesses? I'll give you a hint. He's regarded as one of the best running backs all time.
Barry?
No.
Walter?
He played in the 50s. He came out in the 50s. He was drafted then.
Jim Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew that.
1957.
I don't know why I didn't guess that immediately. Is he the only rookie to ever do it?
The only rookie. To ever win. Yeah, that year he had 942 yards on 202 carries with 9 touchdowns in 12 games. And he also had 16 catches for 55 yards and a touchdown.
Yep.
And then returned 6 kicks for 136 yards.
Yeah.
And that was his lowest rushing total of his entire career.
Yep.
For a year.
Jim Brown was dominant. Crazy. Jim Brown was dominant. I mean, at this juncture, it's projected that CJ Stroud, if he maintains the rate that he's been performing at this season, he'll have 5,035 yards, 29 TDs, 9 interceptions, with a 99.3 QB rating.
Yeah.
So.
What argument? Okay, so if you think there's an argument, what argument do you think would be made against him?
Not enough touchdowns.
Not enough. Okay, so do you think he would need to get to like the 40 for that not to be an argument against him?
Yeah. Yeah, because he's got 2 touchdowns on the ground, right? So, and 17 through the air. It doesn't help that he has 2 fumbles as well. So, 6 total turnovers on loss because he only lost 1. But, so
right.
He's at 19 over 6 total. He's not really the rushing type of QB. He's just not, because of his skin color, everybody wants to say how much of a mobile QB he is. But, you watch CJ Stroud and he's a pure pocket passer, really. He has a little bit of agility, but, he
can extend plays if he needs to.
Exactly.
He can.
And it's just one of those things where it's like, you watch him play. He's actually just a pure pocket passer. He can extend plays as needed, but, you don't want to. If you're the Texans, you're trying not to get CJ Stroud on his horse very often. Because if he gets a clean pocket, he's going to shred defenses. And that's what that is.
That's where he's really excelling at. Is finding those receivers down the middle or deep down the field, for a 40-yard bomb.
Yeah. And, I think honestly, if he gets 35 touchdowns, that's where you can be like, okay. But he can't have another performance where he's sitting there and throwing 3 picks again. He just can't.
Right.
Moving forward on the Texans schedule, they got the Jags, Broncos, Jets, Titans, Browns, Titans, Colts.
So for the Texans are a team that I would love just to see them make the Super Bowl. Honestly, I think it would just be such a fun storyline and almost like a meme storyline.
Yeah.
Because it's just because so many people wrote them off at the beginning of the year. Even at the end of last year, so many people just automatically wrote them off.
Yeah.
And then after seeing all the moves they made, they still wanted to write them off. Even now, people still want to hate on them and write them off and say that, that they're not going to make it anywhere in the playoffs, where I think that they very realistically could. Yep. They could make a deep playoff push. I wouldn't be surprised if they make a title game, but I don't expect it. I think they kind of stop at the divisional round. That's where things kind of end for them. I think make it that far. Make it to the playoffs as a whole, even if it's a wild card, right? I think is a major improvement. Even if they don't make the playoffs, still major improvement on last year. I think they're a playoff caliber team. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I think they're a playoff caliber team. I think they have what it takes to make a push in the playoffs and be competitive. I just don't think they're going to make it to the Super Bowl.
Neither do I. I think that they're a divisional-like team, but they're young, too.
So in the next couple years, I think they could make the Super Bowl. Because all the young players are going to be better, and then the players they bring in through the draft and through free agency over the next couple of years, I think are going to be pivotal and play a huge part in how they operate and how well they play together. I think they're just going to keep going on, man. I love the Texans. I love what they've done. They're becoming like one of my favorite team to watch because I love rooting for them. Kind of thing. I love the underdog, and for some reason they still seem to be the underdog even at 6-4. But I think they've earned not to be the underdog even anymore. But yet they are. But I'm really excited to see this Jags game. To watch this Jags game this coming week. Because it is going to be massive for them. That could potentially decide the division winner, I think. Now, obviously, for the division winner, both teams would have to win out for this game to really matter that much. I was trying to look at the standings real quick.
7-3 to 6-4.
Yeah. So if the Texans win, they're both 7-4, right? So then, assuming the Texans win out and assuming that the Jags win out, then we're talking Texans win because of that
win earlier in the season against the Jags. Yep.
Yeah, that tiebreaker. So from that perspective, even if at the end of the day, this game is going to be massive to kind of almost decide that division winner, regardless of if a team wins out, right? Because if Jags lose, they almost have to win out and hope the Texans stumble.
Drop a game or two, yep.
Yeah.
They would need to drop Jags 2 games over the Jags.
Exactly. So that's why I think this game is going to be so massive, is because there's almost more writing on this game for the Jags than there is for the Texans.
Yeah,
because the Jags kind of have that mindset. The Jags kind of have that mindset of, well, not only do the Texans still have that control, but the Jags have that, I think, kind of have that mindset of having more pressure on them because people expect more from them. Thus, if they don't, then there's going to be all this hate and calls for probably people being fired or something like that. Whereas the Texans have none of that. People didn't expect shit from them this year. People didn't think the Texans would win like 4 or 5 games this year. So they don't have that pressure or have that same pressure that the Jags do.
Well, the big thing for me is like the acquisitions that they got this offseason. You look at their offensive line and, you got Laramie Tunsil, who stud left tackle. You got Titus Howard, who's a top 3 left guard in the NFL. You got Michael Dieter, who is a top 5, top 7 center, really good at his job. Shaq Mason, who you can argue is top 3 guard, period, in the NFL. And George Fant, who's a much more than serviceable tackle on the other side. And, they spent so much money, I think it was like $113 million on this offensive line this past offseason. And this is how you build a team. You build it in the trenches and you work your way out.
Yeah. So kind of funny with the Texans is I got a old work colleague that's a big Texans fan, and we were in a group chat. And at the beginning of the year, after we did that podcast where we did our like predictions for the preseason and going into the regular season kind of thing, where we thought teams would finish, I told them, I was like, the Texans are a playoff team.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to win 10 to 11 games.
Yeah.
And last week, he's like, how did you predict that? I was like, if you just look at all the moves, all the people they brought in, all the drafting they did, the coaching staff they brought in, like they had the makings of it.
Yeah.
Right? It's what the Jets could have done, but fumbled.
Yeah,
Honestly.
Injury happened.
Well, I'm talking more so like, what was it? Whenever they drafted Zach Wilson, right?
Yeah.
They could have done a little better.
They definitely could.
They could have pushed the can down the road a little bit, kind of thing. That's why the Jets and the Texans have a little bit of similarity to me, is because they both have very good young teams. It's just the Texans have their quarterback, whereas the Jets don't.
Mm-hmm.
Or quarterback of the future. So I'm excited for the Texans. I'm excited to keep watching them play. I think they got a very bright future, and they're going to be a damn good team for the next at least 5 years.
Yeah. I think they're building a dynasty over there in Houston. That brings us to the other team in Texas. Dallas Cowboys, which you perfectly predicted that they wouldn't let up more than 10 points, which that's correct. But you were just slightly off with what they'd score, 42-10. I was saying 42-17. But we both agreed that the Cowboys were going to win. Thoughts on this game?
Nothing really stands out on the Dallas side, right? Because when you see 33 points, you kind of expect big stat lines, but you don't really have any big stat lines. You got Dak Prescott 189 yards, 2 touchdowns. You got Tony Pollard with 61 on the ground and a touchdown. Then and then you got Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb with 42 yards and 38 yards respectively. There's just not a lot of Cook in there. But then on the flip side of the ball, the Dallas Cowboys was able to keep the Panthers in check, which I think we all kind of expected. No one really expected Bryce Young to go off against a dominant Cowboys defense. He had 123 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. They kept Chuba Hubbard in check with 10 carries and 57 yards, and then Miles Sanders 11 carries, 50 yards. So I mean, as a unit, they got 110 yards, which is pretty good. And then for Carolina receiving, you had Adam Thielen, 8 catches, 74 yards. So he had a decent fantasy day. Nothing crazy, nothing great. If he had a touchdown, that would have been amazing. Would have made his day even much better, but that went to Tommy Tremble, which was okay. And then Bryce Young also had a fumble. And then Adam Thielen had a fumble, so it kind of hurt his day a little bit. So from both sides, this was by looking at the stats, you would have thought this was a very boring game to watch. But then looking at the score, you're like, where did all these points come from? Because it doesn't make sense when you look at the stats. People just had these short yard touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb is still the target man, the unquestioned wide receiver 1 in that offense. I don't think you can really argue that with 9 targets. Tony Pollard looked pretty good. Not great, but he looked pretty good. Can't really argue with that performance. But what I'm really wondering is what were the Cowboys doing? Because you didn't really see a lot of big chunk plays. You saw a lot of check down, a lot of short yardage type stuff. So why were they doing that? And then that part just confuses me. I don't understand why they were doing the play calls that they were doing.
Yeah.
And then
100%. Like
for like it just confused me, because I saw the score. I didn't watch the game at all, but I saw the score and I was like, damn, some player like that must be a pretty good stat heavy game. Then you look at the stats and you're like, what?
Well, 2 turnovers will do that to you, especially in the positions that they happened in. Short short field positions will do that, and they were doing a good job spreading the ball around on the ground,
Yeah.
they, had 107 yards on the ground, 6 of it coming from Dak, so 101 by running backs, or by design rush plays, I should say, excuse me. So you're looking at it like that, and it's like, okay, that kind of starts to add up. They start chewing the clock a little bit, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so it's one of those games where Dallas controlled the game very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they did from start to finish. They just controlled the game.
Exactly.
They didn't really try to do anything too risky or try and push the ball downfield. They just wanted to get those plays to get those first downs.
Well,
and they did that very, very well.
And Johnny Hecker for the Panthers, he only averaged like 48 yards per punt with a long of 61, and he only had one touchback and one within the 20. So, like, on 3 of his punts, that means that he was giving up good field position. And then the 2 turnovers, that's good field position. So you just got to go finish the drive there. And that's exactly what the Cowboys did, was they went ahead and just finished off the drives and opportunities that were given to them. And that's what they've been doing all season. The Cowboys controlled the game. And I think you said it best. They just controlled the game from front to back, and that was that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty easy game for the Cowboys, and I think that's really why they just controlled the game, because they knew that the game was never, that there was never a threat of them losing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess
100%.
Bryce and like Bryce Young kind of played how I thought he was going to play. He had a poor game, 123 yards passing, touchdown, interception. I didn't expect a lot from that Panthers offense. What do you think the possibility is of him having like a bounce back year?
Bryce Young?
Next year. Yeah.
Pretty high. I mean, like, here's the thing is, the Panthers haven't started their rebuild yet. And with their signings and shit, these 1-year deals and these deals that are about to expire and shit, they're going to let a lot of guys walk, especially these older guys. And then they're going to go and pick up players, like, they got their QB. They got the guy they want. They know who they're building around. I don't think Bryce Young's the issue nearly as much as, his offensive line and, their running attack, like Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, I think have proven that this season, that they are not RB1 material. Miles Sanders had his chance. He looked like an RB1 when he was with Philadelphia, but, keep in mind he had help, throughout.
Dominant offensive line.
Yeah, and a dominant offensive line, and a lot of his points, via fantasy, that's why he's such a fantasy sleeper, like the last few seasons he was with Philadelphia, was off receptions. He wasn't the type of running back that was going to go ahead and grind you yards and go ahead and get you in a position to win the game just off of his legs alone. It's one of those things where, like, he was catching a lot. He has very good hands, and that's not how the Panthers are utilizing him. I think they're going to clean house at coaching. It's just, like, I think that they need to reset everything, because you do have Bryce Young, who's very talented, and you see it. You see flashes of it. It's just you don't see how much talent he has when he's getting sacked 7 times a game. We were talking about this a little bit with Zach Wilson the other day. It really doesn't help you when you're getting sacked all game long. So far this season, he's been sacked 36 times, and he's been sacked 7 times. So 7 times out of 10 games, he's been sacked 4 or more times. That's not acceptable. You can't let your QB be getting hit like that consistently, and especially a rookie. I think Bryce Young will get better at releasing quicker. He already does release pretty quickly, honestly. But it just doesn't help his case when, he's trying to get a play to develop and he's getting blown up. He only had 16 completions on 29 attempts, but he only had 1 pick, too. And that's just a reflection of how good that Cowboys defense is, but it's also a reflection on how bad this Panthers offensive line is. And I think as this offensive line improves and as Bryce Young gets used to the speed of the game a little bit more, he's going to go ahead and be better. It's also one of those things where it's like, they don't have their first round pick this year. And I think that's kind of the damning thing if you're a Panthers fan, is like, you're sitting there and you're like, at least we're picking in the top 5. No, you're not, because
Nope.
So I don't think that the
Bears
Panthers
are.
yeah, the Bears are picking twice in the top 5. And
Mm-hmm.
you look at it man, I don't know, that hurts them the most, but they'll still get good players and they still have value. But it's also one of those things where throughout the season, Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders only has 682 yards collectively, and you just can't have that. You need to have a better rushing attack that's reflective of their offensive line. And also, I just don't think Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders are the best running backs. Adam Thielen is your best receiver by a mile. He has 726 yards on 76 receptions. The next closest receiver is DJ Shark with 229 yards on 17 receptions. It goes back to what I was just saying. He doesn't have the weapons. He doesn't have the running attack. He doesn't have the offensive line.
He has no help.
We were sitting there and saying how good this Panthers defense was and how good it should be in this past offseason, but they took a step down. A couple key losses throughout the offseason, and also, they're just injury riddled throughout their whole entire roster. Shaq Thompson's down, Jeremy Chin's down, Justin Houston's down. We're talking about a lot of key positions that just they're not there on. You look at the defense and it's just they got Derek Brown still, they got Brian Burns still, but they are really missing Shaq Thompson. They are really missing, Justin Houston. They are really missing Jeremy Chin. Those are key defensive spots that, they have good veteran guys that they're paying a lot of money for, that just aren't playing. And, offensively, Adam Thielen shouldn't be your primary weapon. You're not going to win a lot of games with Adam Thielen being your primary weapon. And that's not a gash on Adam Thielen. It's just, it's kind of like the Larry Fitzgerald theory, the Cardinals always had a really good wide receiver one with Larry Fitzgerald. It's just, you need something else other than that as well. DJ Shark is definitely talented enough. It's just, Bryce Young isn't getting enough time in the pocket to utilize him to his maximum potential. And the same thing with Chenault as well, especially on four receiver sets that we see the Panthers try to go into sometimes. It's looking rough, man. So with the Panthers, I don't know. I think that they were expecting to be better this year than 1-9. I think they were expecting to go probably right around 500 and be picking in the middle of the round, and that's why they were willing to make that trade. But all chaos has pursued for the Panthers, excuse me. And when you're rebuilding a team, you really want to have that first round pick, and especially if you're picking number 1 overall, which is looking like the Panthers might be. Now the Bears might be, and that's a tough thing to deal with. But that goes ahead and leads us into our next game, where Austin predicted that the Titans would win 24-21, and I predicted that the Titans would win as well 24-13, but the Jags end up getting their act together, and they were able to score early and quickly. We've seen Will Levis put on a good performance, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns, only sacked twice, averaging 9.3 yards per completion. But on the running side of the ball, we're talking about them not giving the ball enough, and the Jaguars defense just played good. I just don't think that they got the job done as effectively as they needed to. Derrick Henry had 10 carries, 38 yards, and DeAndre Hopkins had 4 receptions, 59 yards, touchdown. Those are your highlights for the game. Proving DeAndre Hopkins is still a viable flex start. We had questions about that going into the week. I think that he's proven that he is a viable flex. And Will Levis has proven that, he's a good QB2 in a lot of leagues. But when you flip to the other side of the ball, you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're now 7-3, leading that division over the Texans by 1 game, and by the Colts by 2 games. And Trevor Lawrence goes and has himself a day, 262 yards, 2 TDs, very good performance. And Travis Etienne goes ahead and gets 14 carries for 52 yards. He also gets 3 receptions, 7 receiving yards to go ahead and stack that up as well. And, a solid fantasy performance there as well. About 10, 11 points, solid flex. So, low game fantasy-wise for Etienne, but, realistically, he still had a pretty good game. In real life. And then you look at Calvin Ridley, who has 7 receptions, 103 yards, 2 TDs, just fucking had a field day. I don't think that this is going to end up being a consistent performance. What about you, Austin? Do you think Calvin Ridley will be able to keep up a similar performance stat line for 7 receptions, 103 yards, and 2 TDs a game for the rest of the season?
Calvin Austin?
Calvin Ridley.
Calvin Ridley. Okay, I thought you said Calvin Austin. Wait, when did we jump back to the game? I think he has that potential, but I don't ever think it's going to happen.
So do you think he is a lock to stay at wide receiver 2 at least?
Yeah, comfortable wide receiver 2 for sure. But I don't think we're going to see 100+ yards from him every game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's more realistic that we see, 60 to 70 type range.
I could definitely
with an occasional 100-yard performance, like every 2 to 3 games, every 3 games or so.
Yeah, I can see that.
So I do kind of think this game was a little bit of an outlier.
I do too.
For sure.
He did put up 83 yards against the Steelers, 6 receptions, 10 targets, but that's his other highlight game of the season, other than against Buffalo and the Colts early on, which he had 101 yards, 1 touchdown against the Colts, 8 receptions. Buffalo 7 receptions, 122 yards, no TD. But I think honestly we will see consistently 70, 80 plus yard performances for the rest of the season, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get 5 receptions. So, with that being said, I think he's a comfortable wide receiver 1 at this juncture. I think he's coming into his own. Guy didn't play for a damn year and a half, and now he's finally starting to get into the swing of things.
He's definitely doing better than I expected.
Yeah.
For sure. I get the argument for wide receiver 1. I just feel more comfortable putting him at wide receiver 2 for the time being, at least. Just to kind of, until we get more consistent performance from him, again, those 70-yard games. Because, like, his last, 6 games, he had 103 yards, 20 yards, 83 yards, 5 yards, 30 yards, 120 yards. Right, so he definitely has proven that he has that potential to be that wide receiver 1, even that elite wide receiver 1, that top 5 category. But I don't think he's quite there yet. I think you should be starting him more as a wide receiver 2 to low wide receiver or the high wide receiver 3, that type range.
I think he's high wide receiver
flex. Like definitely in every week flex for sure. But it kind of seems like Christian Kirk might be that one to start every week as that wide receiver 1.
I could see that
role. I feel more comfortable with that.
I think I'm more comfortable
sooner than later. Personally. I think sooner than later really is going to take over that wide receiver room, though.
Yeah.
As the season went on, I thought it would be this year, but it's proven that it's not going to be this year. And that's looking like it might be more next year, which is understandable because, like you said, that dude didn't really take, but he was off. He wasn't playing football for a year plus.
Yeah, because he came off like a half-season injury with the Falcons, which is exactly when he got his suspension. Mind you, should I remind everybody that Calvin Ridley got a full season suspension while Deshaun Watson had, 7 games for sexually assaulting women? So
11.
11. Yep. So
wild.
We're
not gonna get too much into it because no need to, but it blows my mind the way the NFL decides to handle suspensions.
Yeah. 100%.
And how they decide to levy the punishment. It baffles me every time. because sports betting, I don't think should be illegal for football players. Now they kind of just introduced a rule not too long ago where as long as you don't do it on team facilities and I believe games you play in.
NFL games, period.
NFL games, period. Okay. Then you're fine, which I think is good. I would even like to see them allow NFL betting, just not on your own team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just not for like the Jags, for example, or the Titans or the Steelers.
Yeah.
If you're a Steelers player, kind of thing.
Yeah,
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, you know, like.
But I'm glad they changed the rule. They changed the rule.
I guess the thing that irks me the most about the whole thing is I would get it if he bet against the Falcons, because he was on the Falcons at the time. But he didn't. He bet for the Falcons to win. Like, it's not, and that, you know, that's a big deal because it's like, you know, if you're betting on your own team to win, you're doing that anyways. You know, like, if you're betting against your team, then there's an issue. But if you're betting on your own team to win, it shouldn't be like, I don't think that should be punished at all. And I don't think it should be like advised at all. I think if you bet on your own team to win, then you're fine. I don't think it should be problematic at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's different if you're trying to fix the game, right?
Yeah.
Purposely lose to win a bet or whatever, like we saw in previous sports. Then it's different. Then I could understand the suspension.
Yep.
But just betting in general when you're not even playing, I think it's kind of ludicrous.
For your own team to win?
Yeah, but it's crazy. It's wild. Don't make sense.
You know what else is wild?
NFL is crazy.
The NFL is crazy. Tyreek Hill is also
crazy.
Wild.
Nah, he's slow. What you mean? How's he wild?
10 receptions. 146.
That man's got Tom Brady speed.
Hey, bro. I think you're getting yourself mixed up with Tyreek Hill on your fantasy football or your flag football game last week.
Nah, bro. Nah,
No, Tyreek. 10 receptions, 146 yards, and a touchdown.
Yo, if Aiden O'Connell doesn't have those
3 picks,
he only has one turnover. If he only has one pick, I think it's a much different game.
Yeah, you predicted that the Dolphins were going to win 31-17. I predicted 24-14 Raiders. Ended up being 20-13 Finns. And, you know, the score doesn't really reflect how good Tua Tagovailoa was that game. 325 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Monster fantasy week. 86 yards on the ground from Raheem Mostert. Tyreek Hill, as I mentioned at the top, 10 receptions, 146 yards a TD. So just fucking monster fantasy week, fucking 30-point week. At wide receiver, that's insane. But you know, you flip over to the Raiders side of the ball, and right, I think you hit it right on the money. If O'Connell doesn't have those 3 picks, the Raiders win this must-win game. Like, this might have put the Raiders outside of the grasp for the playoffs. Like, their season might be done off this loss. This was a must-win game. And I think this wasn't just a must-win game for the Raiders to, you know, statistically get in. But also, I think this was a must-win game because it was like, the Dolphins are a tough team. If you can beat the Dolphins right now, then you can beat any team in the NFL. They're just one of those teams.
Yeah.
And
they're a dominant team.
The Raiders put up a good fight. They proved that their defense is good enough to hang with anybody, but their offense still leaves too many questions, especially with Aiden O'Connell. Which, you know, honestly, like, if Jimmy Garoppolo was starting in this game, I don't think that they would have even put up 13 points. I think Aiden O'Connell might be the answer. He's a rookie, so, you know, we have to give him
the offense looks so much better.
Yeah, the offense looks so much better. Like, you got to remember he's a rookie, and it seems like these late round draft pick rookies never get the fair shake. You know, we give the nod to Bryce Young for being a rookie, and that's okay. But, you know, Aiden O'Connell, who was taken in the 4th round, I believe, doesn't get a nod at all because he is taken in the 4th round and he's expected to be better than Bryce Young. You know, like, that's not fair.
No, not at all. See, the Raiders fell down to 12th in overall standings. For the playoff picture. With the Ravens win, let's see here. So they're up to number 1.
Yep.
Since the Chiefs lost.
Yep.
So now Baltimore has the number 1 seed, which is kind of cool. Kind of good for them, I guess. Whatever.
Fuck the Ravens.
Fuck the Ravens, man. I'm so over them. That was perfect timing. Did anything really stand out to you in this game? Any surprises for you? Or is it
No,
kind of
I think you and I both knew the game was going to come down to Aiden O'Connell being good or not, and that's what the game did come down to. Was the Raiders just needed him not to throw those 3 picks. If he doesn't throw those 3 picks, he probably has a 300+ yard day and 2 touchdowns, and that's the difference. They would have held.
yeah.
I mean, you got to keep in mind, man. Like the Raiders' defense
Bless me.
played really fucking well. They were forcing turnovers too. They ended up getting 3 turnovers that game. So like they made the game playable. Just if Aiden O'Connell throws one less interception, one more touchdown, this game goes to overtime, and they might have won it. And that's saying he only throws one less interception. Living in the world of what ifs, it's just one of those things where it's like, it's tough to see. A guy I mentioned earlier, Robert Spillane, who had 13 top tackles. Mo Rig, who's been coming into his own, had 10 tackles. When you have 20 tackles in the middle of the field, you're going to win a lot of those games and keep those games close. And that's exactly what the Raiders did. Max Crosby comes out, gets a sack and a tackle for a loss, pass deflection, 2 QB hits. They're getting pressure on Tua. They're doing what they needed to do. Just they weren't able to finish the job. And I think that's been the story for the Raiders this whole season. Is just they haven't been able to finish the job. But I do think Aiden O'Connell.
I mean, at this point, you might as well just let him play out.
Yeah, and find out. Yeah, because like I think you could actually entertain the conversation of him being your guy, and you don't need to draft a guy this year. I think you could build around Aiden O'Connell and work around this team, and I think you could honestly do something with him. He looks good when you're watching him. He's aware. He's got mobility. He's just a very good quarterback all around.
Yeah, because I'm trying to look up at all his starts.
He's a very good quarterback all around at this stage of his career as a rookie. If he's playing similar to this next season, then it's very problematic.
Yeah, I think he also does have the benefit of being a 4th-round pick.
Yeah,
because with that comes less pressure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so if he does play the same next year, people won't be questioning him as hard as they'll be questioning someone like Bryce Young, for example. Right. So so in his 5 previous starts, he's done fairly well.
Yeah,
Let's look at it.
He hasn't. I don't think he's had more than one turnover the rest of the season, other than against the Dolphins. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, because
they go out against
the Giants. He had 209 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Against the Jets, 153 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And then today, 271 yards, or not today, but on Sunday, 271 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. So, hasn't played bad.
Yeah.
But he's 2-2 right now as a starter.
Yep.
So I mean, I think he's played well enough to continue playing it and see where things go, see how things play out. I think the Raiders definitely made the right choice in firing Josh McDaniels.
100%.
And bringing up the linebackers coach.
I mean,
I know you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
right.
The thing is with Josh McDaniels is like, I love Dameon Pierce going up and being the head coach. He got a Super Bowl winning coach. He won with the Giants. I can't remember what team he beat, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways.
Interesting.
Anyways, could you remind me of what team it was? I just really can't.
That's all I gotta say to you, man. That's all I got.
But no, and
the Patriots.
The Patriots, thank you. But it's funny that the Patriot Slayer takes over for the Patriot Haysayer, or not Haysayer, but fucking servant. You can't go into a meeting with your team and get at them for talking bad about the Patriots if you're the head coach of a different team. You just can't.
Right.
Like, the team's getting hyped up. They're saying, "Yeah, fuck the Patriots." We're the Raiders, and then you're like, "No, don't talk about Bill Belichick that way." Like, come on, bro, chill the fuck out. Damian Pierce, he comes in and you see an automatic change. You see this team's hungry to win, and they put up a competitive fight against the Dolphins, and I think that they had their guy at head coach. And, I think if Aiden O'Connell goes and gets 2 or 3 more wins throughout the rest of the season, I think that the Raiders are going to be comfortable with him at the helm, because you don't need a guy that's going to be an elite passer right now. Like, this could be a deep playoff push team if Aiden O'Connell makes improvements next year, and, they keep the group together on defense. Throughout the rest of this season, things are looking kind of scary for the Raiders. They got the Chiefs twice. They got the Vikings, Chargers, second game against the Chiefs, Colts and Broncos. So they got a tough lineup coming up, and I can only see them winning 1 or 2 of these games realistically, and that's okay. That's okay if you're the Raiders. Your expectations coming into the season, I don't think was necessarily playoffs, but this past week I was saying Josh Jacobs should go ahead and go off. It's starting to get to be that time of the year for him, and I couldn't have been more wrong. 14 carries.
He went
39.
the complete opposite way.
Yep, just really rough week.
He heard you say so. I was like, let me not do that.
Hey, it's that Steelers Ravens hatred, bro.
He's like, let's just do completely bad.
Yeah.
How much of that do you think was because of the Dolphins defense versus play calling?
I mean, man, I don't think it was the Dolphins defense, if you want to be honest. It just seemed like he's sluggish when you're watching film. I think it's a Josh Jacobs issue more than anything else. They gave him opportunities. They gave him 14 carries. He only got 39 yards. They could have stuck to the run a little bit longer and gave him probably 6 more carries. But, you're playing against the Dolphins. You recognize how scary this shit can get really quick. And you need to put points.
Broncos learned that one.
Yeah. Yeah, the Broncos learned that one 70-20. Devastating, bro. Fucking Madden score.
Bro, for real.
But, they could have gave the ball to Josh Jacobs a little bit more and probably got him running a little bit harder later in the half. Later in the second half, but they they passed the ball a little bit too frequently. I think with hindsight you would have ran the ball a little bit more, especially with O'Connell throwing 3 picks, but that tells me that they trust O'Connell enough to give him a chance to win a game for him, and he just didn't come through. But I don't think that's going to be permanent standing for him. I think that this is a lesson to be learned, and he can be better in the future because of it.
Yeah, I think he has a bright future.
Me too. Talking about another team with a bright future coming up. We were just talking about them.
The Chicago Bears.
The Chicago Bears go and visit Detroit. They have 2 top 5 draft picks coming up from the looks of things. They're currently 3-8. Justin Fields, 16-23, 169 yards. Yeah, honestly. 1 TD, no picks. At this juncture, do you think Justin Fields is the issue?
No, I don't.
He also had 104 yards on the ground. I forgot to mention. The
Bears have a pretty good defense.
Mm-hmm.
They have what's the making of a good offense, right? And what that mean by that is they have a good quarterback. I think they have a good running back in Khalil Herbert. I think he's a pretty solid running back, and I'd be happy to have him on my team.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got 1 good receiver, DJ Moore, and then
Cole Kmet,
their tight end and Cole Kmet. Yeah. I was going to mention him. Jeez, come on now. But where I think they're really lacking is other weapons. Right, is when they can't rely on DJ Moore and Cole Kmet. When he can't rely on those guys to get open and to throw to them, where's he going to go with the ball? Right, they don't really have any other solid wide receivers that you can rely on. They don't have a good number 2.
Yeah,
and I think that's their biggest weakness right now. Because you don't want to rely on Darnell Mooney or, someone like Tyler Scott or St. Brown.
Not Amon-Ra.
Number 2 guy.
Not Amon-Ra, which we'll get to. Amon-Ra, St. Brown in just a moment.
Yeah, his brother.
Yeah.
But in their offensive line, I would argue is pretty good. They've been playing better, seems like, as of late. I would say. But if the Bears want to actually seriously if they want to be taken serious, they need to go out and make some splash moves on the offensive side of the ball and get some better weapons for Justin Fields.
Yep, 100%.
I don't get the argument that he's the problem, which is what some people want to make. Because when you watch his game film, he looks good.
Yep.
Right? He can throw, he can move, he can run. He's quick, he's agile, he makes pretty good reads most of the time. He gets the ball out quickly. He doesn't get sacked a ton.
Nope.
He can escape that pressure and roll out and still make the throws while on the run. Dare I say the answer for the Bears at quarterback? It's just the Bears were not ready for Justin Fields.
Yeah.
They were not ready to do what's needed to give him the tools to succeed, the players to succeed around him.
Correct.
So that's what I would like to see them do this coming draft, is with one of those top 5, assuming they have 2 top 5s, right? Because they still might fall out one of them. Their pick might fall out top 5.
They're definitely top 10. 2 top 10 picks.
Yeah. But I would like to see them go out and get someone like Marvin Harrison. I would love to see it.
It'd be insane if they got Marvin Harrison.
I'm gonna say it every week. I want them to get Marvin Harrison, because then that gives them 2 legit targets. Well, really 3, because then you'd have DJ Moore, Marvin Harrison, and Cole Kmet.
You know, if the Bears have this first overall pick, do they take Marvin Harrison with the number 1 overall pick?
Maybe, because it's possible the Giants try and snipe him at like 3 or 4.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of thinking. And like,
so
the thing is, like, the Bears don't need offensive line. Like, you see a quarterback that scrambles around a lot, and like, you know, like you see a running game that's not efficient. Like, usually you blame the offensive line, but when you're watching the tape, it's like, you know, they have a good O-line. Like, they finish off blocks. You know, you got Tevin Jenkins, who is just a player I'm in love with. If Tevin Jenkins was on a team like the Chiefs or the Eagles, he'd be regarded as one of the best guards in the NFL, which, in my opinion, he is. You got Darnell Wright at right tackle. You got Braxton Jones at left tackle. You got Nate Davis, who is a known mauler from Tennessee. Just really good offensive line. And Lucas Patrick, like, you got Cody Whitehair deep on that roster as well. You know, like, I think they have the pieces on the offensive line to be a really elite offensive line. It just comes down to exactly what you said, is the wide receiver room's too thin. They don't have enough talent at wide receiver. And, you know, DJ Moore is a good wide receiver, 1, but, like, I think he'd be a better wide receiver 2. You don't want DJ Moore to be your wide receiver. You want, you know, like a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. to be your wide receiver 1. And the reason we're so high on Marvin Harrison is, like, he's a lock. You know, you're talking about a great character guy, which I think the Bears need that. You know, they need a guy who comes into that locker room and says, you know, like, I don't know if you've seen him say this, but he said something along the lines of, you know, by the end of my career, I don't care about all the accolades I get. You know, it's almost like he's saying, yeah, I know I'm going to get accolades. Yeah, I know I'm going to be a Hall of Fame wide receiver. I already know that. I want to make as many people happy as possible. And that's a big deal. You know, like, you don't have to deal with your George Pickens issue that the Steelers are dealing with right now. You know, you don't have to deal with, you know, Elijah Moore going out and saying how bad the Jets offense is a couple seasons ago and ultimately going over to the Browns, or an Odell Beckham situation when he was on the Browns. You know, you don't have to deal with that. You deal with a guy that has good character that wants to see your team win. And when you can get that type of character in your locker room, I think he's worth the first overall pick. That's why you take quarterbacks with the first overall pick, because they tend to be your leader. And if Marvin Harrison can end up being the leader alongside Justin Fields, I think it's the perfect dynamic for this Bears team to turn around. You know,
take him with number 1, because that risk is high that he's not there at, say, 5, right? Because I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants try to take him, because they also need to upgrade that wide receiver room heavy. So if the Bears pass on him, Giants might swipe him at 4.
100%.
And then they might lose their chance to get one of the more generational talents in this coming draft.
Yeah, and, you know, like, something else I want to circle on the Bears still a little bit deeper. You know, they got Yannick Ngakoue. at defensive end. Now they got Montez Sweat as defensive end. You got your edge rushers solved. You have your edge rush issue solved. You don't need to worry about getting an edge rusher in that top 5 pick. So, what does that leave open? Well, you got Tremaine Edmonds in the middle of the field, who's one of the best middle linebackers in the NFL. When he was with the Bills, he had that high regard because he was on a playoff team. Now that he's with the Bears, it seems like everybody forgot his name. Eddie Jackson, who I think is a top 5 safety in the NFL, doesn't get nearly the love he deserves because the Bears are a bad team. So now you're looking at the other positions. Like, you got Jalen Johnson, who's a solid corner. He's been making a name for himself. But you got Kyler Gordon at your other corner, who's like mediocre at best. Your weak side linebacker and your strong side linebacker are definitely leaving questions. You got Noah Sewell at your strong side linebacker, but he's been coming off injury. It's just like this defense, has been a strong point for the Bears these past few years. Just they have good pieces. Just they have those gaping holes in between, like we were talking about with the Texans this offseason. If they go ahead and fill those gaping holes with, like the defensive tackle out of Illinois, I can't remember his name for the life of me right now. That'd be a great pickup. In the second round, they're picking early. They get the guy out of Penn State at corner. Then, you have a very successful draft just right there. And I think those two pieces would literally turn around this Bears defense. And so their first 3 picks being Marvin Harrison, interior defensive lineman from Illinois. I can't remember his name. I'll look it up. And the cornerback.
Wait, hold on, I got it. Who was it again?
Illinois' defensive tackle.
Okay. So, wait, why can't I see it? So I'm looking at a mock draft right now, and they have the Bears taking Caleb Williams number 1 overall at the moment.
Yeah, but
and then the Cardinals taking Marvin Harrison. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then this other one, they have the Bears taking Marvin Harrison number 1 overall, which I love.
Yeah,
I think that's the right pick for him.
I agree.
I don't think there's really any other pick for him to take. Because wide receiver is your biggest need, and you're getting one of the best receivers we've seen in a long time.
100%.
So I don't foresee them passing. I don't think it can, and they're definitely not going to take quarterback because, like we've talked about, Justin Fields is not the reason. He's not the issue.
Exactly.
Did you find that player yet?
I'm getting it pulled up still.
Okay.
But while we go ahead and get that sorted, how about you go ahead and lead us into the Lions side of the ball? Jared Goff throwing 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions.
Well, are you talking about Keith Randolph Jr.?
No, I'm talking about Jerzon Newton. Jerzon Newton.
Okay. Yeah, I just saw that. I saw him. Okay.
Yeah, Jerzon Newton is a stud, and he might be a little bit of a reach for the Bears, but this is assuming
top 10 pick.
Yeah, it's really realistic that they go and get both those guys, and that ends up being a big change for what the Bears are trying to do. And I'm talking about Kalen King out of Penn State when I'm talking about corner. And, there's a chance that the Bears trade back to, where the Falcons are, maybe even the Packers or the Bucks, and they still get Newton, and they might be able to slide back into that first round and get Kalen King. And, worst case scenario, they trade back, and Kool-Aid McKinstry is still on the board, and that's definitely not a bad draft pick to get either. And there's also Cooper DeJean, who, I think is going to be good, but I'm much more high on Kalen King and McKinstry, personally. And, of course, Nate Wiggins is in that discussion as well.
And you think they'd be good fits for the Bears?
Yeah, I think specifically Kalen King is the best pick for the Bears. Kool-Aid McKinstry, McKinstry is he's the standard cornerback. I don't think that... I think he's plug and play in any defense, which is one of the highest regards you can give to a cornerback going into the NFL. He could just go in any defense, just like Christian Gonzalez could. And the Patriots got a steal with him. Kool-Aid McKinstry is just a similar type player, just very talented, very physical, very lengthy, he has all the assets there. But then, you look at a guy like Kalen King, and he's that he's that physical type. He's that Joey Porter Jr. type, that tough, nasty, gritty type. And he plays over in Penn State just like JPJ did. And when JPJ was there, that's why no one was passing on them. And this season, we're seeing a similar result with Penn State. Kalen King's leading the secondary to be a no-fly zone. I think with the addition of Kalen King, because check it, with these 3 draft picks, this is the difference. Justin Fields at quarterback, Khalil Herbert at running back, DJ Moore at wide receiver 1 to start the season, Marvin Harrison at wide receiver 2, and Darnell Mooney at wide receiver 3, Cole Kmet. And then we talked about their offensive line pretty in depth already, and you have a really good offensive line. You switch to the defensive side of the ball, you got Ngakwe, and you have Newton at your defensive tackle, and then you have Justin Jones or Andrew Billings, whoever you're feeling more comfortable with, and you can rotate them, honestly, because they're both serviceable players, and you got Montez Sweat on the other side. Your linebacker core doesn't really change, but you can always pick that up in free agency for pretty cheap, and you should be able to have enough spending money this offseason to go ahead and improve that linebacking core. Then you go ahead and have Jalen Johnson, who's been playing really well this season, at your left side corner. You got Jaquan Brisker, who's a mediocre at best safety, but you can probably replace safety pretty cheap and get an upgrade this offseason as well. Eddie Jackson, who I still love at free safety. I think that he's still a really good safety that doesn't get his roses. And then you replace Kyler Gordon with a guy like King. Well, now where's the hole on that Bears roster?
They're looking a lot better. Plus, that's not counting any free agents moves that they also make.
Yeah.
2 on top of that.
Yeah.
So I would love to see them make that moves, but that ownership group and GM just leave a lot to be desired to not make moves that are smart or make sense.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if they just go in the complete opposite direction. If I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Being real.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either, but I can hope otherwise. The Bears are almost there. And, I think when you draft Justin Fields, Justin Fields wants to win games for an organization that isn't winning games. And I think that speaks more to, how much of a leader he is than people want to give him credit. If Justin Fields was, just a mediocre quarterback, then the Bears wouldn't have stayed in this game 26-31 and almost fucking win it. Justin Fields wasn't the reason that they lost this game. He had a fumble, but he didn't lose it. He didn't have a pick.
He's always been a high character type of guy.
Exactly. And, he's able to get the ball down the field. We've seen that. He's able to run the ball in sketchy situations. We've seen that. It's just one of those things where the Bears are right there. I thought that they'd be there this season, but they proved me otherwise because of those gaping abysses at several positions, wide receiver being one of them, and specifically defensive line, linebacker, and cornerback. You got 4 positions that you need to address badly because those are where you're getting hurt the worst. That's why, Amon-Ra came out and had himself a fucking field day. Was because, the Bears run a base 4-3 defense on a lot of snaps. You're not switching over, Jalen Johnson over to that side of the field. That's why he only has 2 tackles. He did have a pass breakup, but, you're leaving.
They did have 3 interceptions as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and Kyler Gordon, you can't leave him on an island with Amon-Ra, and that's what happened, was he was just getting burnt up by Amon-Ra, and just can't let that happen. I think, Amon-Ra had 5 receptions or 6 receptions on him. Not acceptable. You can't be letting wide receivers get out of hand like that, and if they had that other cornerback, check it, they would have won this game. If they would have had a solid second corner, they would have won this game. They would have shut down Amon-Ra, and then their top receiver would have been Jahmyr Gibbs at 6 receptions, 59 yards. And let's assume that Amon-Ra had half his production, 4 receptions for about 40 yards. That's a completely different story. And Jared Goff was already having a tough time. As you mentioned, he had 3 interceptions, but he did have 2 touchdowns. Montgomery went out and had himself a field day, 76 yards, 6.3 yards per carry, and a touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs, 8 carries, 36 yards, and a touchdown, both showing fantasy relevance. Jahmyr Gibbs, as I said, had 6 receptions, 59 yards as well. So most of his fantasy relevance coming through the air. That TD definitely did help him and help his case to pursue like relevance. And I think I'd be comfortable starting either of these running backs at running back 2 at least.
Yeah, me too. I would also agree with that. How would you rank the Lions as a whole against the rest of the NFC?
I think they are the best team.
Best team, even against compared to the Bulldogs.
Even against the Georgia Eagles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Philadelphia Georgia Bulldogs.
Yep. No, like, the thing is with the Lions is we've seen more grit from the Lions. And it's just like, what's the argument against the Lions? Like, they have one more loss, sure, but the Eagles, I think the Eagles and the Lions are right on the same tier. And if I had to pick a team, I'd rather, like, if they go against each other in the NFC Championship, I'm taking the Lions. Like, I think that they're the better team, like, it just boils down to one of those situations where, like, I just like how their team's built a little bit more. I like how the Eagles are built, but, like, with the Lions, you have Jared Goff at quarterback who's been proving that he is good enough to be in that high caliber quarterback. He is proven that he can be statistically a top 5 quarterback throughout the season. And, if he's not top 5, he's top 10. And
yeah,
you got a great 1-2 punch at running back, which the Eagles don't have that great 1-2 punch. They have Swift, who had a 2 or 3 game stretch where he was just elite, and then he's been good since. You got 3 really good wide receivers with Amon-Ra, Josh Reynolds, Jamison Williams. You got Khalif Raymond and Donovan People-Jones on the bench. Like, really solid. You got Sam Laporta, who's a fucking stud. You got a really good offensive line, which, like, I think that their offensive line at this juncture is better than the Eagles. You got a really great defensive line, which I give that edge to the Eagles. The Eagles do have a better defensive line, but the Lions aren't far behind. I would say that the Eagles have the best defensive line in the NFL, and the Lions have probably the 3rd or 4th best defensive line in the NFL. But then, you go into their secondary, and you got Cameron Sutton, you got Brian Branch at safety, you got Kirby Joseph, you got Jerry Jacobs, who have all proven to be very serviceable. You got Derek Browns, Alex Anzalone, and Jack Campbell at linebacker. You have, like, where's the hole on this team? With the Eagles, like, it feels like, their cornerback 2 leaves a little bit to be desired. With their offensive line, it leaves a bit to be desired, especially with the departure of Isaac Samalu. That's the reason I'm comfortable with saying, I'd take the Lions.
I get it. I'm just used to hating the Lions.
Me too.
And it's fun for me to hate the Lions at this point. It's kind of like my bit.
Yeah.
If you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so I continue to hope for their downfall, which is why it pains me to say that they're actually a good team. And I don't think they're quite on the level of the Eagles, because personally I would still pick the Eagles and the 49ers to win that game. But they have made a drastic improvement, and I think they're a force to be reckoned with for at least the next 5 years.
So, like, here's my thing with the Lions, too. Like, you got to keep in mind, they have 2 losses this season. Well, let's look at those losses. They lost to a good Seattle team in overtime. They got smacked around by the Ravens, sure. But, they had a bad game this season, and they lost to the Seahawks and a nail-biter. But then, look at their wins. It goes back to what we were talking about with Michigan, funny enough, about a week or 2 ago. When we were talking, do they deserve to be in the college playoffs, which, after their win this past week, they definitely do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Against Penn State, not against Maryland. The Maryland game made us raise some eyebrows, but they can get things back under control with Iowa State.
Topic for another time.
Yeah, true. Sorry. But, like, with the Lions, they beat the Chiefs in a nail-biter, but then they go smack the Falcons, they go and smack the Packers, they go and smack the Packers, Panthers, then they go and smack the Buccaneers, they get smacked by the Ravens, but then they go and beat the Raiders by 2 scores, they go and get a nail-biter against the Chargers, and then they have a pretty close game against the Bears. Now they go to Green Bay, they have Green Bay come visit them. Then they go to Big Easy. Then they go to Chicago. Then they host Denver, go to Minnesota, go to Dallas, and then they host Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So that's how like it's looking right now. Like, you know, honestly, I think their only hard competition is going to be the Cowboys through the rest of the stretch, and I think they beat the Cowboys. Like, what can you like? The thing is, they're dominant in their wins. Usually, like several of their games, they've blown out teams.
Mm-hmm.
They've only gotten blown out once, and their other loss is a close game, you know. And they beat the Chiefs. They beat the Chiefs set. They went past the Chiefs test, you know. So now, like, it's just the reason I say that they're the best team is just they're young and they're growing throughout the season, and they're not feeling the growing pains because they have a veteran mindset. You know, offensively, they're very veteran-oriented at this juncture, other than wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, that's kind of how you want it to be, too. You want your wide receivers to be young, and you want to have good young guys. That's exactly how I want it to be. You know, I give the edge to the Lions with wide receivers. I give the edge to the Lions with offensive line. I give the edge to the Eagles and the 49ers on defensive line, but I don't think the Lions are super far behind. Like, defensively...
No, they're not.
Defensively, like, I could agree that the Eagles and the 49ers are the better teams. But offensively, I think the Lions are the much better team. You know, and I think, like, it goes Eagles at number 1, 49ers at 2, and then Lions are number 3 in the NFC. But then offensively, I think that the Lions are the best team. Like, just fundamentally. And then it goes, like, I don't know. Like, after that, it's like, then you can put the Eagles. And I'm not comfortable with putting the 49ers third there. So, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the 49ers stay in that discussion because they haven't proven to me that they are that team yet. And I need to see it.
Yeah, no, I don't think they've done enough maybe this year yet. But I think they definitely have the ability to be that team.
Yeah, 110%.
And I think that, you know who else I think has the ability to be that team? Not the Packers, because fuck the Packers.
True.
I hate the Packers. Even though they won 23-20 this week, and we both thought they would lose.
Yep. I predicted that the Packers would only score 23 points. But I was wrong about the Chargers going and getting that final touchdown. I was so close, bro. My prediction was so close. I said 27-23. You said 35-20. And we both said Chargers victory. Mm-hmm. We were both wrong. Justin Herbert, give me that one touchdown so I could get that gold perfect prediction.
I mean, he didn't play. He had him a... Oh, my eye's so itchy. But Justin Herbert won 21 of 36, 260 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had 2 sacks. But then he had 73 yards on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, like, Justin Herbert played really, really well.
Yep.
He played a damn good game. He did.
You know,
he didn't really have the completion...
Or almost 350 yards per scrimmage.
He didn't really have the completion percentage that you'd want. Outside of that, he still had a really good game because he didn't turn the ball over.
Yep.
Well, outside of his one fumble, but that wasn't a lost fumble.
Yeah.
You know,
Jordan Love had himself a day, and, you know, I think the biggest thing with the Chargers is if they just ran the ball more, like, it would have been a different story. Like, that's the biggest thing with the Chargers is, like, they don't run the ball enough, and it costs them games. You know, it doesn't matter how good your quarterback is. When you got your quarterback dropping back 40 times a game, you're not going to win. You're probably going to win 50% of those games, and that reflects with their 4-6 record. You know, their defense isn't good enough to go ahead and carry them like, you know, you'd hope that they could be. But, you know, like, you got a guy like Khalil Mack who went and had himself a really good day. 2 sacks, 2 tackles for a loss, pass deflection, 2 QB hits. But, like, you know, like, yeah, I think it's time for a change of head coach. There's too much talent on this team.
Austin Eckler had 10 carries of 64 yards, but he had a long of 37. So if you take that one long run away, he's averaging 3 yards a carry.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you are right that it is time for a change of head coach. I saw on, I think it was ESPN, where I think it might have been Rex Ryan actually, that said Staley needs to go back to being a Division III head coach. And I thought that was kind of hilarious, but also very true.
Yeah, because like here's the
Also
thing,
because they're wasting the talent on that team.
Well, he's not playing. He's all statistical football. He's trying to moneyball the NFL. Thing is, the NFL you can't moneyball like that. You can't. You can moneyball your way into a championship like the Rams did, but look at the repercussion the Rams had to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
The NFL just isn't an organization you can moneyball in. You just cannot. And he's all about percentages and all this shit and going for it on those risky 4th and 1 plays and shit. But don't. Settle for a field goal. Settle for those points. It doesn't matter what your percentages say. Get your fucking points. Get the fuck out. That's how
because games like this prove that a field goal makes all the difference.
Yep.
Those small points they think might not matter actually do matter in the end. And this is just another game that proves that.
Yep. Cameron Dicker, he only had a field goal at 26 yards away. That's his maximum range that they gave him. The difference is literally just you going in and getting 2 more field goals. You're telling me that you can't get in range 2 more times for your kicker? Then maybe you need to get a better kicker. Kickers win games. Special teams win games. Should I remind you of the 2007 LA or San Francisco Chargers? Or San Diego Chargers? Excuse me. San Francisco.
San Francisco Chargers.
No, San Diego.
Did that happen?
San Diego. I'm sorry. San.
Yeah, I got you.
They were number 1 on
Makes
offense,
sense.
number 1 on defense, but their special teams was horrendous, and they missed the playoffs because of it.
Yeah, and maybe they do need clean house.
But that leads us into our next game. Both organizations are sitting there. They don't want to win. They want the lowest record possible at this juncture. It seems like because the Commanders had a chance to turn this thing around. It seems like Sam Howell's trying his damnedest to keep them away from a top 10 pick so they don't draft his replacement. But it just seems like everything goes against him, man. Tommy
He's
DeVito,
not the problem.
I don't think he's the problem either. But you know how the Commanders organization is. Tommy DeVito, son of Danny DeVito, allegedly, went out, had himself a fucking field day. 246 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, fucking elite performance, and got sacked 9 times. So that's showing something that's major, with the loss of Chase Young and Montez Sweat. They're still getting pressure on the quarterback, and that's huge. Saquon Barkley, they kept relatively in check. They allowed 5.9 yards on average per carry, but only 83 yards on the day, and he had a 36-yard long. So, realistically, he probably had about a 4.3 yard per carry. I want to say. Maybe a little bit more, but still, he had a good day. But Logan Thomas being the top receiver throughout this game with 5 receptions, 58 yards. Brian Robinson right behind him. Or he had a better fantasy week. 7 receptions, 58 yards, Brian Robinson definitely is proving that he is worth that RB1 start. No touchdowns on the day is kind of a bummer, but, with the yardage he got, he still put up 20 points. 20.1 or 20.2 points. So I'm happy with that at RB1.
I'd say it's hard to complain.
Yeah.
With those points that you get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you're the Commanders right now...
Jesus. Oof. Okay, I'm good now.
Do you think it's time to go ahead and... We're talking about 2 teams that should probably fire their whole coaching staff, honestly.
I get the argument. But I don't think it's going to happen.
And what happens if Tommy DeVito goes and just finishes out the season super strong? Do you think it's actually a conversation we can entertain? Through 2 games, he has 506 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Or through 4 games.
Entertain them letting go of Daniel Jones type thing?
Yeah.
Not Not anytime soon. Because of that contract that he got. Let me look it up real quick. Because if they do release him, that contract is massive.
Yeah.
So that dead money hit is going to be massive. Let's see, over the cap.
But, Tommy
Right, so
DeVito...
currently, he's counting for 20% of their cap.
Yeah.
So dead money, you're looking at about $25 million.
That could be worth it just to cut the cord. Because, Tommy DeVito's on an undrafted rookie contract. So, he's cheap.
Oh, wait, sorry. If they cut 70 million pre-June 1st. After June 1st, it's 47.
I would personally
so the best
be
option
cool with that.
would be to... Their best option might be to trade him.
Yeah. What team would even take him, though? And do you think it'd have to be a situation where, like, you're getting a 4th-round draft pick back for him and you're paying some of his salary still?
No team comes to mind for him.
Yeah.
Honestly. I think realistically what's going to happen, and I hate it because I don't like Daniel Jones, and I hate the contract that he got because he didn't deserve it, I think. He didn't play like he did. Their best bet is they're probably just going to ride it out, at least for one more year.
Yeah.
If anything, he might just be the most overpaid backup quarterback there is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a real possibility to have happen. If he does go anywhere, it might be somewhere. Let me think.
What about the Falcons? Maybe the Raiders?
I was just about to bring it up. Well, the Raiders are pretty tight in cap, so I don't think it's going to be them. But Falcons got some flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, let me look at cap space for teams. So then we can even see if any team is available.
While you're looking into that, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about this next game we got going on.
All right. Let's hear it.
So you predicted this game, right? 34-13, 49ers. I predicted 27-24 Bucks. The game ended up being 27-14 49ers. So you got this one right. I got it wrong. I'll admit it. I'll admit it. When I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Fuck the Bucks.
Hey, fuck you, bro.
Baker Mayfield's trash ass.
Hey, bro. You're right. But...
I hate Baker Mayfield, dude. I don't know. I hate him. I don't know why I hate him so much. I can't explain it to you if you ask me.
Rachaad White didn't have himself a great day. Mike Evans saved himself because of that touchdown, was still worth about 15 points. He had 12 targets, but, at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough. And Baker Mayfield committed 2 turnovers. Brock Purdy stayed pretty clean. Committed 0 turnovers, 333 yards, 3 touchdowns. Got sacked 4 times, but hey, that's neither here nor there. Christian McCaffrey went and had himself another field day. Who would have guessed? 5 receptions, 25 yards, 78 on the ground, and a touchdown. So, he's worth 21 points. RB1 staple, obviously. Brandon Ayuk went and had himself a field day. 5 receptions, 156 yards, and a touchdown. So, worth 26, 27 points. Right there, George Kittle playing like George Kittle. This game, this is kind of what we were expecting. I predicted the Buccaneers won it because they needed the win, and San Francisco was coming off a cold streak. But it seems like San Francisco's gone back on the pony, and they are playing to win. This was a game that was really big for them as well, because if Seattle won against the Rams, then this could have been a completely different story of how this division setting, and there's still a chance that San Francisco falls into that wild card spot, because they are 7-3, and they still got 2 dates with the Seahawks. They're going to Seattle this upcoming week. They got Thursday night football, Thanksgiving night, against the Seahawks. Then they got the Eagles. Then they got the Seahawks again. They got the Cards. Then the Ravens. Then the Commanders. Then the Rams. So they have 4 really tough games coming up.
What do you think they finish out at then? How do you see them in those final games?
I think that they split with the Seahawks. I think they lose to the Eagles, beat the Cards. So I'm thinking 2 wins, 3 wins, 4 wins throughout the rest of the season, and they lose 3. So they end up being about an 11-6 team.
I can vibe with it.
Yeah, and like
11-6. I mean, that's good enough to get you to playoffs. And realistically, unless you're getting the number 1 seed, all you care about is making the playoffs.
And we'll circle back into this a little bit later, but the Seahawks, like, I think that they have just about as tough of a time, but I think that those 2 games really decide it. If the Seahawks go and win both those games, then they own the tiebreaker in the division, and I think that they're in a very similar position with playing tough teams late in the season. That they're going to end up being right around the same record as well.
So real quick, because we were talking about earlier, I want to circle back to the salary cap space.
Mm-hmm.
For 2024, I'm going to read you the teams that have the most salary cap. Titans at 100 million, Patriots 91 million, Commanders 89, Texans 85, Bengals 84, Bears 82, Colts 77, Lions 73, Raiders 66, Cardinals 64, Buccaneers 62. Out of those, to me, the most likely scenario is that the Bucs could try and go after him.
Mm-hmm. Daniel Jones.
But that takes away a lot of their cap.
Yeah, I don't.
Unless they can restructure, right?
Yeah, I don't think a team will be paying the full cap. I think that they're going to be like, Giants, you got to pay at least half of it.
Yeah. Either that or they can get Daniel Jones to take a massive pay cut.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is realistically. But a little side quest real quick, because I thought that's funny. The Saints are negative 71 million right now.
Just out of curiosity, where are my Steelers at?
Your Steelers are 8 million, 8.1 to be exact.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so not horrible.
That's after rookie contract calculations too, as well, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
So, yeah,
Oh wait, hold on. So they're effective, which is including like rookie contracts, is negative 3.3.
Okay.
Yeah, so the effective cap space is after signing 51 players and its projected rookie class to its roster. So I think if any team does try to get him, it should be the Buccaneers. But why would you do that when you could get Baker Mayfield, who's been playing solid, on a much, much cheaper contract?
True.
So I think that just kind of plays more into Daniel Jones just sitting tight and having another year at it.
Yeah.
Playing into his overpaid ass.
Yeah. I think the Bucs would be the best fit. But I don't think there's much more to circle on that game. Bucs did Buck things. 49ers did 49er things. Now, let's talk about a game where 2 teams that have been up and down all season go into an AFC East showdown that could have shook up the standings pretty bad if the Jets won. But you predicted that the Bills were going to win 2017. I predicted the Jets were going to win 21-14. We thought that this was going to be the close game of the week. We thought that this might be the game of the week even. And it ended up being a blowout, 32-6.
Yeah. I wasn't surprised.
I wasn't.
Zach Wilson did Zach Wilson things and got replaced per usual by Tim Boyle, who looked, even though he had an interception, to me he looked more comfortable.
Yeah.
Than Zach Wilson, and the offense looked better overall.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not surprised he got named the starter going forward.
He's just taking those.
Were you surprised?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I don't think Zach Wilson was the issue. I think Zach Wilson somewhat was the issue because he wasn't taking the checkdowns and taking the free yardage that the defense was giving him. Sure. That's a big deal.
Yeah, Zach Wilson loves to push it downfield. Right? Yeah. He loves taking those chances, and that's always been one of his bigger downfalls. He likes taking too many risks and won't just take, the easy yardage.
Yeah. And, like, honestly, like, Brees Hall only having 10 carries, that's problematic. They, coming out of the first quarter, they were only down 6. And then coming into the half, they were down 16-6. So, like, a touchdown and a field goal away. You can't abandon your run game that early, man. Especially when you have Brees Hall and Dalvin Cook. The way that you beat in the Bills throughout the season is controlling the clock and getting in Josh Allen's face, minimizing those situations where, minimizing those situations where, you can get burnt. Making it so Josh Allen has to do those checkdowns because he doesn't. He won't. He's stubborn about it. That's why he has 12 picks on the season. That's why he's been sacked 14 times. Because, he'll throw the ball away instead of checking it down. And that's one of Josh Allen's biggest flaws. But, with that being said, you let Josh Allen do Josh Allen things, he's going to beat you. And the Jets did. They didn't interfere enough. And I do think Zach Wilson has potential. And I think that once Zach Wilson becomes a free agent, I think he'll get a Jared Goff type renaissance. I just don't think the Jets are the right team for him, and I don't think that they're built around him correctly. When the time comes, if Kenny Pickett keeps playing the way that Kenny Pickett is, he has a chance to prove it at this point that, he deserves to be the starting quarterback of the Steelers. I wouldn't mind Zach Wilson coming in, and giving him a shot. Or, he ends up going to a team like, maybe even the Giants in a couple seasons, or,
Do you think the Jets try and release Zach Wilson after this year?
No.
Or because he is still on the rookie contract, so right, so it's still fairly cheap, even if it is in a backup role.
Because, like, here's my big thing, right? If the Jets somehow weasel their way into the playoffs this year, and Aaron Rodgers goes and gets a chip, let's say that scenario happens, does he retire?
No better way to retire than on a freaking chip, man. So it's possible.
Yeah. And, like, they're probably not going to, so probably Aaron Rodgers is going to, come back next season and everything. But, in the case scenario, entertaining the idea. But, the thing is with Zach Wilson is, like, he's cheap. He's a good second string quarterback. And, like, you could trade him. I could see them trading him because you could still get like a third round value for him and take none of his
low
contract.
level.
Yeah. Third, second round pick.
Maybe he goes to the Bucks and he competes with Baker for a shot.
Yeah.
And sometimes all a player needs is just a change of scenery.
Yeah.
Right? A new team, new players around him.
Yeah, even a team like the Seahawks, I would love to see have a chance with them. And that brings us to our next game. You predicted the Rams were going to win 24-17, and I predicted Seattle was going to win 30-13. Rams ended up taking over this game 17-16 in a nail-biter. And honestly, in a game I don't feel like they should have won.
Why that?
I think Seattle played better. Honestly. That's what it boils down to. Like, I feel like this was Seattle's game to lose and not the Rams' game to win.
Mm-hmm.
And not just coming into the game, but even the game, like, there's missed opportunities several times throughout the game. And, Jason Myers missed one field goal, and that was the difference. That was the difference in the game. Jason Myers doesn't miss that one field goal, then they win that game. Like, they had equal turnovers. They, both played pretty clean ball. And in a game like that, there's no reason that the Rams should beat the Seahawks. There just wasn't. But they somehow figured out a way to.
I don't disagree because the Seahawks are a much better team. They just unfortunately also lost Kenneth Walker, early in the game, which I think was a major hit for them. Even though they do have a very talented second running back in Zach Charbonnet, who did 15 carries for 47 yards. But I don't think he's quite on the level of Kenneth Walker, which is why I say it was such a massive loss for them.
Yep.
Right, because Kenneth Walker does so much for them. Gino played well too as well. I mean, he didn't turn the ball over. It's about much as you can ask for them, but they also went up against a pretty good Rams defense.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised the Rams won. I just thought it was also going to be a little bit higher scoring than it was.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Yeah.
But with that being said, do you think they need to start getting JSN more involved in their offense? Or is it kind of what you expected?
I mean, he had 6 targets. You know, DK had 9, Tyler Lockett had 7. So, like, he's involved. He is getting involved. It's just, you know, like, this game, none of the receivers really had that great of a game other than DK, and the touchdown saved him. You know, to have a great game, he had 21 points. But, you know, Tyler Lockett had 10, and JSN, you know, had 7. But, like, it's one of those things where I think Najigba is getting involved. And it's just, you gotta realize, like, they got a lot of talent on that offense, and they're going to be passing the ball around to DK a lot. Tyler's going to get open a lot. So, you know, the thing is with JSN, he's in the perfect situation for him, I would say. Because you got
he's
DK
learned from 2 great wide receivers.
Yeah, like, schematically, JSN is a perfect Y. Tyler Lockett is the perfect Z, and DK is the perfect X. You know, so, like, you have the perfect wide receiver core. I think, honestly, Geno Smith is starting to show why he is not an elite quarterback, why he's not considered a great quarterback, why he's considered only a good quarterback sometimes. And it's because he's not winning these type of games. You know, the Seahawks should be winning their division at this juncture with the amount of talent that they have on the team. You know, should I remind you that they have Quandre Diggs, Bobby Wagner, Devin Witherspoon, Julian Love, Leonard Williams, Trey Brown, you know, on their defensive side of the ball. And, you know, Devin Bush is having a bit of a career renaissance as well over on the defensive side of the ball. And showing what he can do as a box linebacker.
So do you kind of think on the offensive side of the ball, it's a Geno Smith problem and not really a play calling problem?
100%. You know, like, we're talking about the same play calling that got Russell Wilson into MVP votes.
Right.
You know, like,
so
I don't know how much easier you can make it for your quarterback. Like, he's
got 3 amazing weapons.
4,
really, if you want to count the running backs.
What about Noah Fant?
I wouldn't call him amazing, but I mean, he's a good weapon to have.
He's a good tight end.
He's a good tight end. He's a good tight end.
And the thing that he offers is a great 6-man. You know, when you need him as a 6-man, he's able to block. And I think that's very invaluable. You know, that's why I'm so high on Pat Freiermuth when we're talking about, like, GM discussion, rather than, like, I'm high on him in fantasy too, but, like, in GM discussion, I'm willing to say Pat Freiermuth is a top 5 tight end in the NFL because of his blocking ability. You know,
very good blocker.
And Noah Fant offers a very similar scheme. You know, big body guy that's going to get receptions down the field, that he's not going to go and rip off 50 yards like a Travis Kelce or George Kittle, but he's going to be the type of guy you go ahead and pass him the ball. He'll get tackled immediately. Sure, he's not getting that yak yardage, but that's the type of guy that you get your first down secured with. That's the type of guy where, you know, he stays back to block on a release route, then you're going to go ahead and have, you know, a lot more time to go get it to one of your playmakers, like your Kenneth Walker, like your DK Metcalf, like your Tyler Lockett, like your JSN, you know, like, and they got a good offensive line, you know, it's probably top 10. And they got a good enough defense. They have the pieces in place, and they have the coaching staff in place. You know, their defense is injury riddled, but it's also one of those things where they have enough where they should be winning more games than they are. I think that they should have 2 more wins this season than they do.
So you think they should be pushing number 1 seed?
Yeah, definitely. I think that they should, like, we're going to see it on Thanksgiving, man, because if they beat the 49ers in Candlestick, like, that's huge. Then they go They go and host Dallas, then they host the 49ers, then they go to Philadelphia. This 4-game stretch decides if they get in the playoffs or not. They go 500 on this stretch, they're probably in the playoffs. They don't go 500 in this stretch, they are probably out. Like, and that 500 is with the 2 wins over San Francisco, and God forbid they end up getting 3 wins over this stretch. Then the Seahawks are an actual team. Like, they're scary. And, they have notable wins throughout the season. We mentioned this earlier. They beat the Lions in overtime. They beat the Browns. They lost to the Ravens. They got their ass whooped by the Ravens. But they beat, as I said, they beat Cleveland, It's just one of those things. They lost to the Bengals, but barely. They lost to the Rams, but in a pretty fashionable way, and like, if they go and win over Cincy and Los Angeles, now we're talking about a team with only 2 losses. But I don't know, man. I think it's a Geno Smith issue, like,
I would agree.
I
frankly
don't know, man. Like, when we're talking about like landing locations for Zach Wilson, maybe Seattle would be a great fit for him.
At what point do you think they would pull the ripcord on Geno Smith, so to speak?
At the end of the season, if they don't make the playoffs. It's playoffs or bust for Geno.
Okay.
Like,
you think so? Ooh.
Well, that's the position that the franchise is in. So, the thing is with Geno is...
Yeah.
He got him to that point last year. And that's why he even kept the starting gig. Remember the talks...
He got that contract, yeah.
The whole reason that, last season we were talking about who's their quarterback. Drew Lock at the beginning of last season. We thought Drew Lock was going to be the starter, and then all of a sudden it was Geno Smith.
And
then
he balled out.
But like, this season he's had a couple good games, but a couple good games ain't going to be the reason you get into the playoffs. And if what's holding back is a quarterback, go get your guy. Go get a guy that will get your job done. Especially in a draft where, you might be able to trade up and get a guy like Bo Nix. Like, realistically, he might slide past 15. You might not even have to trade up if you miss the playoffs this year.
Mm-hmm. I was deciding if I hate that or not, but I don't. Because realistically, contract-wise, you could move on from Geno almost at any time. Realistically, after and during this offseason, if you do decide to move on from him, it would be this coming offseason. But at the same time, I personally don't think he will, because you still got him on a fairly cheap contract.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you do decide to cut him or trade him, you're still dealing with that dead money. And then you're going to get another, first-round pick, which still is a good amount of, probably a good amount of money, right? So I would like them to, but I don't think it's something that's really going to happen. I think they'll give him at least one more year.
You don't think that they drafted a developmental guy even?
It depends, man. It depends on who they get in free agency as well, leading up to the NFL draft. Because if they could get someone like Zach Wilson in a trade with the Jets, I don't think they're trying to try and draft a quarterback.
But what if they could get a guy like
at the same time? But at the same time, if they do draft someone, I think it's probably going to be like in the 3rd round.
So
I'd probably say
PFF is projecting Sanders out of Colorado to go 38th overall. They're also
at the same time. I mean, they've already been... So it's already been said. Now I don't know how true it is, because Shedeur, I don't think, has said it himself that he's going to be coming back for another year at Colorado.
Yep.
So maybe that's more reason for the Seahawks to wait and see.
Yeah. They could also get Michael Penix Jr. out of Washington.
Love him.
And
great quarterback. Great prospect.
My favorite pick, because I agree that they get a developmental guy later in the draft rather than like the 2nd round or a 1st round pick. J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan, who has been playing sensational football. And of course, Quinn Ewers should be available around that spot as well.
Yep. Especially if he declares, which it looks like he's going to declare.
Yep.
Right now. I don't think he really said if he is or isn't. What about the guy from Notre Dame? Forget his name. I'm blanking on his name right now.
I don't know, man.
Blanking
Like,
hardcore on his name.
he's a sophomore, I think. Bushner.
I thought he was a junior.
Are you talking about Bushner?
Guess I'm from Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I think he's with. Actually, I think he's with the Crimson Tide now, right? Sam Hartman.
Yeah, that guy.
So Sam Hartman, like he's serviceable, but like also like my biggest issue with Sam Hartman is his size. He's 6'1", 210 pounds, so he's not your prototypical size. Also, like his completion percentage isn't as high as I'd like it to be, and I also don't like the fact that he's in a pro style system already, and we've seen him make a ton of mistakes. He doesn't offer anything like that jumps off the stat sheet that's like, wow. He's a redshirted senior, by the way, so he is going to be declaring for the draft this year. But at Wake, he played his last 4 seasons at Wake, or 5 actually. His best season was 4,228 yards, and the way this season's going, he might be lucky to break 3K. He's gotten sacked 14 times. Like his release is pretty quick, but I don't know, man. Sam Hartman is definitely definitely a project quarterback, but he doesn't have the prototypical size or the arm talent that you want in a prototypical quarterback or in a developmental quarterback. Like he doesn't have that talent. So, like it'd be similar to like a Tom Brady coming out of college type pick. I'm not saying he has that type of talent, but that's the type of pick you're looking at when you're looking at Sam Hartman, probably a 6th-round pick.
Yeah, cheap guy.
A Stenson Bennett,
A cheap guy.
Yeah.
That brings us into our next game. Vikings Broncos. So I said the Vikings were going to win 27-20. What were we going to say?
Go ahead.
I said the Vikings were going to win 27-20. You said the Broncos were going to win 27-14. You got the correct pick. I was wrong, but I did get the number correct that I thought the Vikings were going to score, or that the Broncos were going to score.
Oh, I guess you didn't. My bad. But
I'm rolling with it. You already said I did, so I'm rolling with it.
I fixed it. Don't worry about it.
No.
Thanks for bringing that to my attention.
I was rolling with it.
Hey. If you didn't stutter right there, I probably wouldn't have called it.
Because I looked at the score and then I looked at what I said. I was like, that doesn't quite add up. So like messed up in my brain. My brain had a load. My brain glitched.
Yeah, you're like, wait. And I was like, wait. Yeah, he's right. But
I was like, wait, no. I just kept trying to talk so you'd forget.
Yeah. Joshua Dobbs, he had a good game. He looked solid, and it wasn't a bad game for him. It's just, I think it was a mediocre game, which is a good sign for him that his bad game was a mediocre game. That's what it boils down to for me. They trusted the running backs to run the ball and take care of business, and for the most part they did. They just weren't able to finish the game. This was a game where,
right.
Completion percentage was the biggest issue, and that's what cost them the game. Also, the 2 fumbles lost, so they ended up having 3 total turnovers. That definitely didn't help them. And even with 3 total turnovers, the Broncos offense still couldn't rally over 300 yards.
Oof. So, okay. How surprised are you that the Broncos won?
Moderately. I'm not shell shocked or anything. I'm just like, yeah, I thought the Vikings were better than this, and I think the Vikings are. I think they just.
I think it's a different Vikings team once JJ comes back too as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been saying
if
that.
JJ was back for this game, I think they win this pretty. I want to say easy, but I think it is more like a 28-21 type game. I think they get that extra touchdown. I think they are able to open up the offense a lot more. But they've proven that, I mean, TJ Hawk and Jordan Addison, I think, are going to be focal points of the offense going forward, along with Jefferson.
Yep.
I think they kind of proved that because they each got, TJ Hawk got 7 targets, Jordan Addison got 6 targets. You know, that might go down slightly with JJ there, or it might stay the same, and they just end up passing 40 times a game.
But you got to remember as well,
JJ,
they had 28 rush attempts on running backs.
Yeah.
So, they had 58 total snaps, and they had, a lot of them being on the ground, which is fine. That's sometimes how you got to do it, and that's how you win a lot of games in the NFL. You got to run the ball. And, that's a big reason that the scoring has been much lower this season, is because these defenses have came around, and we're starting to get that class of cornerbacks that are able to keep up with the new rules and everything, and not give up those pass interferences and give up those cheap holding calls that we've been seeing for the last 4 or 5 years. We're starting to get that class of cornerbacks that are developed, like your Sauce Gardners, like your Devin Witherspoons, like your Christian Gonzalez's, like your JPJs. Like, we're starting to see that class of cornerbacks come in, like your Brian Branches, dare I say, at safety. We're starting to see that class of cornerbacks come in and, take care of that deep end coverage. And these cornerbacks that are veterans finally adjusting to that coverage fully. And, it's just one of those things where, like, you mentioned the stat earlier in the segment about the current average of total scores of games is like 43.5, which is the lowest since 2009. I think the biggest reason for that is because running the ball is becoming such a critical part of the game again. For the last 4 or 5 years, it's been, you don't run the ball as much because you're able to dink and dunk. Well, now you can't dunk as much because you're getting, your edge rushers dropping back into hook coverages and covering the flats and shit. And then you're out, especially in 4-3 schemes, you're getting your strong and weak side linebackers dropping in coverage. You're having 2 guys dropping coverage no matter what to cover that flat zone and make sure that they're not getting those dink and dunks. And we're starting to see that finally develop, and now we're starting to see the NFL get regulated again. So now we're going to start seeing that score be a little bit lower because the running attack is going to be much more valuable. That's why, a lot of these games are over in 2.5 hours, is because they're running the ball so much.
Do you think the Vikings are going to stick with this current kind of game plan and run more than a pass, or do you think it's just purely situational?
I think it was just situational. I don't think it's a bad thing that they ran the ball. They lost by 1 point, against a good Broncos team too,
A surging Broncos team at that.
Exactly. They're getting hot at the right time. And that's the scariest thing, Broncos team that ain't got nothing to lose at this juncture, they feel like, and they're kind of flipping the script. They just got their 4th win in a row. Like 4 weeks ago, we were saying the Broncos are out of this thing. They beat the Packers. We said the Broncos are, so what? They beat the Packers. Then they go and take care of the Chiefs. At Arrowhead. Like
that.
Yeah, and then they go and take care of the Bills, and now we're like, hold up, what the hell's going on? Then they beat a surging Vikings team that have rallied around Joshua Dobbs. These next few games really will tell the tale of, how good this Broncos team is. They got the Browns next week, which I think that they can win. They got the Texans.
They should win.
Yep.
That'll be a tough game. Texans
is going to be tough. We'll say it's a loss, so they're 6-6 right now. Then they got the Chargers. Then
should be a tough game.
They should win it though, so we'll say that they move up to 7-6. They got the Lions, probably lose that one, go to 7-7. Got Patriots, should take care of that. Move up to 8-7. Got Chargers, should probably win. So now they're 9-7. Then they got the Raiders, and now they're all of a sudden they're 10-7, and that might be enough to squeeze you in.
I wouldn't. That might be enough for, like you said, to squeeze them in. I like that 7th seed.
Yeah. Especially with the big thing that helps the Broncos a lot is the AFC North still has so many matchups against each other. They're going to be knocking each other out of the playoff contention because they got to go head to head. That's
going to help them a lot.
Exactly. So like if the Bengals end up taking one over the Browns later in the season, like I think it's this upcoming week, you go ahead and take it over the Browns, then, or next week, not this upcoming week, the next week. they go ahead and take it over the Browns, now you're really starting to open up that wild card picture, and especially if like the Steelers keep losing, then it's anybody's game to get back into it.
How realistic do you think it is for the Broncos to make the playoffs? If you had to put a percentage chance on it, what would you say?
You got a quarter?
All right, so 50-50. I mean, I'm with it. They obviously need teams to lose ahead of them, but it's definitely not out of the realm of possibilities.
It helps that I think that there's 5 AFC North head-to-head matchups still. It helps them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the Steelers still have 2 dates with the Bengals, and then the Browns have a date with the Ravens and the Bengals, and then I think the Ravens and the Bengals have 1. So 4 total head-to-head matchups left.
Yeah, like, see, the Broncos are currently the 10th seed. They're behind the Colts and the Bills.
Yep.
So they need both those teams to lose, or Pittsburgh to keep losing as well, so they get knocked out of the playoffs. And they might be able to potentially surge up into that 7th seed. But currently, as it stands right now, the Colts win the tiebreaker over Denver just based off of win percentage in conference games.
Yeah.
Too, as well.
The Broncos can make up, too, because they got the Chiefs twice. Like, here's the reality.
And they already beat them once.
Or, did they have the Chiefs twice? Let me double check that. I think I might have lied. I think they already got their games against the Chiefs. They did get both their games against the Chiefs. Yep. They split with the Chiefs.
1-1.
But, like, they're going to need to be a team like the Texans. They're going to need to be a team like the Lions. Like, they proved that they can beat tough teams because they beat the Chiefs, and early in the season, yeah, they got fucking whooped on bad by the Dolphins. But since then, they've been
a much different team.
Let's just look at their season as a whole. Lost to the Raiders by 1 point, week 1. Lost to the Commanders by 2 points, week 2. Lost to the Dolphins by 50 points, week 3. Well, let's just get past that. They just had a horrible game. They beat the Bears in a nail-biter by 3. They lose to the Jets by 10. They lose to the Chiefs by 11. Then they turn it around, beat the Packers by 2, whoop on the Chiefs 24-9. Then they take care of the Bills 24-22, and then they beat the Vikings by 1. We're talking about a team that will keep the game close. Exerting one example. And all those games were within 2 scores, like a touchdown and a field goal. So, I think a 10-point game is relatively close. With that being said, that's why I think that they could take care of the Browns. I don't think the Browns are going to be able to keep up with them. I think that they'll be able to grind them down. The Texans, they need to win that game. That's a must win. The Chargers, that's obviously a game you need to win because of divisional. Both the games against the Chargers that are coming up, and I think they're winnable. I think I give the odds to Denver. Then you go to the Lions. This is a game you can lose. You prefer not to, but this is a game you can lose because it's not a conference game. And then you got Patriots, which I think they could take care of. Chargers, which I think they could take care of again. And then the Raiders, and then I think they could take care of them. They only lost to them by 1, and I don't think the Raiders are as good as they were at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's possible, and I think it's highly likely that happens. So, I mean, come playoff time,
watch out.
Broncos are a dangerous team sitting at 7th seed.
Yeah, and
maybe even 6th seed.
Something for the Broncos, especially if the Chiefs end up going on a cold streak at the end of the season and they somehow end up winning the division. It's possible. We're talking about a 2-game difference, and they split.
Yeah.
They split with the Chiefs, so they could definitely swing back into this. Playing in Mile High is tough because of the air quality.
The altitude. Yeah.
So, the Broncos if they end up turning this thing around, and that's why a lot of those games are must wins. That's the position that when Lions week comes up, if you're 1 game behind the Chiefs, that becomes a must win game.
100%.
It gets so close at the end of the season, especially if the Chiefs just drop one more, and then the Chiefs are starting to look over their shoulder because the Stallions are riding up on them. And that leads us into our final game of this session.
Stallions. I like it. I'm with it.
We got Eagles
Another close
visiting
game.
Arrowhead. Yep. We were saying that this was probably going to be the game of the week, and we were right. This wasn't a great game for either quarterback statistically. And DeAndre Swift had a pretty good game, 6.3 yards per average, 76 yards on the ground, and a touchdown. And he went ahead and had 3 receptions for 31 yards. Still, very valuable game, fantasy-wise, about 20 points. Are you comfortable starting DeAndre Swift as an RB1 at this juncture of the season?
I think he's an easy start.
RB1?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say so. I'd put him anywhere in my lineup pretty easy. He's not someone I'm putting on my bench every week. If I had him on my lineup or on my team, he just won't be on the bench. Whether that's in this flex spot or in the RB spot, he's starting.
Yeah, that's fair.
Honestly, I have no problems with it. I feel very comfortable with it because I know he's going to get that work. And I mean, he got 12 carries, so that's not a ton, but he got the yardage and he got the touchdown. Right. So I mean, that's all you really care about. You don't really care how much. I mean, to an extent, you care about the carries and how much they're getting. But even more so, you care about the yardage and they get a touchdown or not.
Yeah.
And I think he's pretty safe play for the most part. So I'm super comfortable just putting him into that flex or the RB spot.
Yeah. Jalen Hurts came out of the week with about 24 points, most fantasy leagues, or probably about 19 after the sacks.
Yeah.
Solid start, really good game. But, Patrick Mahomes had a pretty rough game, honestly. 177 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Only got sacked once. They did a good job keeping Mahomes in check, and that's a lot easier said than done. Pacheco went
24-43.
Yep. And Pacheco went and had himself a really good day. 19 carries, 89 yards, 4.7 average. Pretty solid. No TD, unfortunately. But, you can't expect that every single game from the guy. But, I think Pacheco's still locked as a flex at least. And I think the biggest issue on this Chiefs offense, and it's going to come back to haunt him, is they don't have a reliable wide receiver 1, 2, or 3. That wide receiver room kind of sucks.
Yeah, no, it's basically Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
At this point. Which is kind of funny to say.
Yeah.
And you don't really expect it. I mean, you get flashes from Rashee Rice and Justin Watson, but nothing super consistent.
Yeah. Which
is a major problem. Like the Chiefs are, I believe, number 1 in the league with the most drop passes at like 27.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. And that's not going to win you games. And that's going to lose you a lot of close games. And we saw that earlier in the year too, as well.
Patrick Mahomes, has been playing out of his mind. He has a 3.2% miss open read. So that's insane. At the beginning, at one point in the season, it was 2.2. Right. So it's one of those things where it's the guys just aren't getting open. It's not on Patrick Mahomes to pass him the ball more effectively. It's literally the guys aren't getting open. And because Patrick Mahomes isn't having an elite type season this year, I think that helps with the CJ Stroud MVP chance. Patrick Mahomes at this juncture of the season, he's projected to be at about 4,500 yards. And 32 touchdowns, 15 picks. So,
right.
I think when we're talking about, does CJ Stroud deserve MVP, Patrick Mahomes is a pretty good comparison, and you're outperforming Patrick Mahomes.
Big time. And then on the Eagles side of the ball, you had Jalen Hurts, who didn't do anything spectacular, but he played well enough.
He got 2 touchdowns on the ground.
The victory. Yeah. He played well enough. 12 carries, 29 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 14 of 22 passing for 150 yards and an interception. Devontae Smith, 6 receptions for 99 yards. Really mad about that 1 yard, but that's fine because he got tackled at the 1 yard. So, So if you started him, you're kind of annoyed because if he doesn't get tackled, that's an extra. If you have bonuses, right, that's an extra potential, like 11 points right
Yeah.
there.
And, Jalen Hurts is the
Yeah.
other MVP candidate, too. And I want to circle on this real quick before we dive too deep. He's at 4,245 yards projected. 4,245 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 15 interceptions.
Yeah.
Probably
I mean,
10.
Sam Howell's leading the league too.
Yeah.
And in passing yards.
But he has too many picks.
Yeah. Nah, I was just throwing out there that he's leading the league. That's all.
It's true.
My boy. My boy Sam Howell.
He's got that dog in him. He's trying his best.
He's got that bark. That woof. He's got that puppy bark. he's got that puppy bark in him.
By the way, I
right
have
now.
a button for that now.
I know. And I love it.
Me too.
It's
But
amazing.
yeah,
It's so
that
great.
Devontae Smith goes and gets that 1 yard. You get your 100-yard bonus plus the touchdown, and so sad.
Yeah,
So sad.
it's so depressing to see too. Like just 1 yard, bro, and then you learn that he got tackled at the 1 yard line.
Mm-hmm.
Just get even sadder.
Yeah. It would have been a 100-yard day and a
Depressed.
touchdown, so you would have gotten your 100-yard bonus. So in some leagues, that would have been an additional 5 points, plus the 10, plus the 6, plus the touchdown. So that ends up rallying you up to, 27 points?
Mm-hmm.
But because he didn't get that 1 yard, he was only worth, 15.9?
Something like that, yeah.
Wild.
So crazy. So sad.
So sad.
So sad.
So sad.
So sad.
So sad.
But I'm okay with it. It's fine. It's whatever. It's just 1 week.
True. I mean, 15 points is still good.
No, it is. It is. It's just I saw him get tackled at the 1 yard line. I'm like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
And
And
it's fine though. It's whatever.
with that being said, that wraps up our weekly analysis. You ended up beating me in predictions on final scores of wins by 1. You got the Texans game right, the Cowboys game right, Dolphins, Lions, 49ers, Bills, and Rams, which that totals up to 7 total correct out of 14 games, so you're 50%. And then I was at 6 out of 15 games, so I was at like 45%. But I beat you in the predicted score category. I got the predicted score for
Only
the
because only because I gave myself away.
and the Chargers. It's true. Only because you gave yourself.
You got. Otherwise, you wouldn't have seen it.
It's true. So you and I both got 9 points this week.
Yeah, I'm with it. That's fine. That's fine. It's whatever.
Hey, you're acting like I robbed you of the points. I just had a typo, bro.
No, you robbed me. You fucking robbed me.
It went into official review, bro.
You robbed me. Flag on the play.
Okay, let me ask you this. Did you get the prediction correct? Stop drinking your basic bitch water and answer my question.
I'll do whatever the hell I goddamn please.
All
right.
Cry.
Please cry.
I'm going to cry when Angles deserve to die.
All right, man. Why don't you go ahead and send us out, Shane?
All right. Thank you guys for coming along. We had a little bit of a chunkier episode this week, almost 3 hours long. It was a lot of fun. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, follow us on Facebook, check out our Instagram, check out our TikTok. We're always uploading clips there. YouTube as well. We're starting a new segment where we're trimming down the pod. So if you just want to check out what we're talking about with your team, you can click on that video and just get the scoop on your team so you don't have to sit through the whole thing. But if you want to see the whole analysis of around the NFL, we got you taken care of. And with that being said, don't forget to give me a follow on twitch.tv/Dripformation, of course, as well. And I hope you guys have a great night, or great day, or great afternoon, whenever you're watching this. I'll talk to you guys soon. End the recording, dude. Dude, come on.
Oh, it was ended on Riverside a long time ago, bro. So funny story that I didn't bring up. Like at some point it stopped recording on Riverside, but it was still live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. So I just didn't even think to say. I didn't want to say anything about it.
Wild.
Yeah, but I mean, it still recorded on. So I mean, I didn't really care. I was like, fuck it, whatever. I'll just download this shit from YouTube.
Yeah,
Who
it
cares?
works. It works.
So that's yeah. I'm saying that's why I didn't say anything. It worked that well.
Yeah, we got the VOD still on Twitch too. Oh, we didn't talk about chat at all. Let's do a post pod chat segment. Quick.
All right.
7/8 says, let Kenny cook. Canada was the most stubborn coach I've ever seen in my life. Tomlin was about to lose the locker room if he didn't fire Canada. The whole offense had enough. Here's a stat for you. Canada was the first coach officially fired during the season since 1944 when Buddy Johnson, I think was his name, was the co-owner and head coach, and he fired himself. I can't remember a time when the AFC is so wide open. Teams that should be dominating aren't. Injuries, coordinators getting fired. The conference is up for grabs. Those are all definitely true statements. And that's a crazy stat that the Steelers haven't fired a coach since 1944. And the last time they fired a coach, they fired themselves.
Like in season?
Yeah.
That's fucking crazy. Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's fucking wild.
Yeah, you know, that's why
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what I was saying this whole time. Like, they need to fire Canada, but it's not going to happen during the season. And I was proven wrong, but you know, that's why. Is because, you know, we've seen bad coordinators and we've seen bad defensive coordinators and we've seen bad coaches. Well, not really head coaches. You know, they had Chuck Noll and, you know, Bill Cowher and then Mike Tomlin. So, you know, and that's pretty much been their coaching staff for the last 60 years. You know,
you guys have had great head coaches, so
yeah.
Just for their side of the ball.
Yep. All right. So I think that's where we're gonna wrap things up. I'm gonna end stream here. Thank you guys for coming.
Stream.
Bye bye.